Oh, hey man, looking good. I like the match in teal.
Thanks, man. I wore it just for you for recording day. Are you ready?
I'm ready. You're my shining star over there. Let's go.
Oh, well, I'm ready too. And it's Sunday, June 9th, and welcome to Covering Our Bases, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, from Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's NL Dan Harrow. I'm AL Warren Sprague. And Dan, it was so refreshing to take in yet another international series over this past weekend, as your Mets were in London, of all places, to play the Philadelphia Phillies. Marquee matchup alert in a two-game series that you guys split. Like, that's good for baseball, and now there's more international eyes following what is going on in the MLB. What does this mean to you? What does this mean to the game? What does this mean to the world? All this international play we're seeing, and is it only going to expand? I kind of hope it does. What do you think, Dan?
It's crazy, dude. Like it's insane to see how much the league game has grown
Mm-hmm.
internationally, especially in places like London. And we've seen games in Mexico City and in Seoul this year already. And the big four sports in America are all working on international games to some extent, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not surprising to see MLB do this. But I remember in past years, I think we saw the Yankees and the Red Sox play a game in London years ago, and didn't see nearly the fan turnout we saw this time. So
Mm.
as a fan, domestically here, it's not really a big deal. I don't really care. I love that my team got 2 extra off days ahead of the series and then some extra days off afterwards. Honestly, that's my biggest takeaway from it. But honestly,
Sure.
I do understand, like, it's big for the game to grow internationally, right? For the league, that's a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I heard Bryce Harper talking about maybe doing some sort of like in-season tournament internationally, like in London or in Mexico City. Like, so who knows? Maybe you could see a lot more of this in the future. But as of now, just being regular season games, like, I don't mind it. I think it's a cool little spectacle.
Do you want to maybe attribute any of the growing international interest in baseball to some of the international players out there? Of course, our generation's Babe Ruth and Shohei Ohtani comes right to the forefront for me, but it's not like we're parading him to all of these various series, right? We've only seen the Dodgers in one of those three. But is there any thought to that? Is it the greatest players in the world internationally maybe starting to give more traction to the game in the States and abroad?
Exactly. Yeah, it's growing the game in different places. So, for example, like we saw the Seoul series, you had Hasan Kim, right? Make go to Korea, make an impact. Like, think about all like the Korean kids who probably only know like the KBO, don't really watch a lot of MLB. Like, they probably saw a highlight on like Korean TikTok or whatever it is, Warren. Like, they saw that and probably thought like, "Whoa, if I pursue baseball, like I could play in my own country in the MLB. Like that might bring it to a whole nother level and inspire a whole nother generation of kids." And
Yeah.
yeah, we might see more international talent coming into the league, and then even more reason to have more games like this. Like, we had only a couple in Korea, and I think there was only one or two players who went to Mexico City that were natively from Mexico. So it'd be great to send teams with a lot more of those players, and I'm sure it'd be a lot more impactful for them.
We'll have to remember this conversation in 12 years when you and I are doing our show, of course, and look back and go, oh man, all those kids who saw those first international series that were really prominent in 2024, they're growing up and they want to play. And we'll get the feels and be like, man, we talked about that once.
Yeah, I remember when there was only 30 teams and not 85 like there is today. Or
Oh man, then covering our bases would take forever. But actually,
12
Dan,
hour show.
I was gonna say our show is extremely long, and I've been enjoying our content. But I hope you guys have out there too. Thank you for the listens. Thank you for stopping by to interact with us. Guys, send some emails, put some comments down, tell your friends. There's no harm in letting everybody know that Covering Our Bases is coming out right now, 10 days. We're kind of feeling, we like this 10-day clip of games to play with you all. We've got a whole litany of, well, some teams got like 7 games, kind of weird. Some teams got, well, about up to 11, I think was the tops I saw for Arizona. So a lot of games have eclipsed since our last talk, and Dan and I are here to see where the patterns and the predictions and the pageantry can lead us now with a fresh anti-ranking batch, everybody. I'm stoked. Dan and I have made a concerted effort that even though we have a longer period of games to discuss, we're going to shorten tonight's show if it's the last thing we do. Why not? You guys want to hear me ramble less? You know you do. You haven't commented it yet, but you're thinking about it, and I get it. So we're going to jump right in. It's time for the anti-rankings, and Dan, I know you needed to double take, but we both, the Mariners and the Mets, that is, we both went 6-3, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm so excited, man. You've got to pick first. Come on, please.
I don't know, man. I mean, you guys had some good wins, and I still feel like technically you guys were the better team. So
don't give me that divisional tiebreaker stuff. Yes, I know. We went 5 of 6 against our division, and you guys didn't quite pull off quite the impressive clip. But I insist, man. Okay? Because all I would do is be boring and throw Chicago White Sox out there again as the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can argue anybody else as our basement bottom squad. Dan, can you? And if you can't, just do it, man. Take it. You deserve it. Okay? The Mets deserve a win.
You're right. I mean, I can't argue with you there. All right, Warren. I'll take it. Let's start things off. Our sinkers. 36. Man, this is weird. I never go first. I don't even know what I'm doing up here.
You can do it.
Number 30 in our anti-rankings. It's going to be Chicago. Warren, going to be boring. It's still the White Sox.
Dan the man let me down after all. Yes, the White Sox were the basement dwellers last week after being our first black hole team. And now after, black hole team means no wins, guys. 0 wins, not a single one. And now after a 4-5 week, I'm lying to you, 4-5, 2-7. Ugh. The Chicago White Sox belong in the basement, says Dan. You tell me why. It ain't nothing but a heartache.
Yeah, man. I mean, we obviously know the expectations on this team. It doesn't feel good about putting them here, but like things just continue to get worse. Their losing streak actually hit 14 games after getting swept by both Milwaukee and Chicago, and then dropping the first game to Boston in a 4-game set. But luckily they stopped it there, Warren. 14 games, that's as far as it went. They managed to win 2 against Boston before dropping the 4th game. So a split in that series. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't want to bury them really, but I don't think we had a team that did a lot worse this week, Warren. There were some winnable games in here, a couple of really close games. They lost both games to the Cubs, 6-7, both of them. So, Warren, at this point, I think I feel bad for the players on this team. We're starting to see a lot more issues with the manager, his second year, Pedro Grifol. I mean, this guy's inexperienced, and you have vets like Tommy Pham, who's like the kind of guy who sticks up for the players and is not afraid to call people out. And he's been kind of vocal about some stuff. And I think there's a lot of respect for him on the team. He came in. The Sox did win quite a few games when they got him, and in the games they didn't, he's been the one producing. So that means something to them. So yeah, Warren, I feel like, I had made the call for Toronto to be the first one to fire their manager. I don't think it's gonna be the White Sox, but I think it should be.
Yeah, well, I mean, he carried over from last year, yes or no? I'm sorry if that's, yeah. So last year wasn't a good year. You saw what happened with Tim Anderson and the entire, like, just this sort of kind of bad boy mentality emerge out of Chicago's, what's the word, reputation. And Tommy Pham definitely fits the mold of a player who can, bang and bonk in the mosh pit with the rest of these White Sox. I don't know if that general manager did the right thing by suggesting his team is flat when there's anybody performing on that level like Pham is. Like, last guy you want to poke and prod. So you're just kind of creating a bad and honestly predictably toxic culture that is not going to have the league rooting for you to rebound into a new direction anytime soon. And that's a bad place to be. I mean, we talked last week about the Mets' cultural woes and saw them rather rise to the occasion. Chicago here just looks like they're ready to embrace being maybe the black sheep of the league for the foreseeable future. And then that's really all we need to leave it at, because they're terrible. They're a terrible team. You did the right thing slotting Chicago right here at the start. Let's hope maybe one day it gets even slightly better. I'm going to go ahead and take the reins with number 29. Number 29 is Nye. And for me, we have to just keep picking the low-hanging fruit right off the bat. Get them over with, if you will, Dan. Can I talk about the Miami Marlins in this spot? I hope you don't mind. Thank you. Yeah, the Marlins went 2-6, and they gave up a 1-2 series to Texas before getting swept out of 2 games by the Rays, and then a 1-2 series loss to the Cleveland Guardians. So everywhere you look, this was a reason for the Miami Marlins to be woeful. And Dan, you know what we love to discuss when it comes to the Miami Marlins. We have to point out the burger count. Yeah. So Miami, every single time they win a home game, they give out a free burger to their fan base there at home. Last time we covered the Miami Marlins, they went a whole week on the road, and we really didn't get an opportunity to hand out a burger or forget about them. This week, they did play some home games. They actually got 2 home wins, Dan. Yay! Burgers in Miami! You got like a double patty of mediocrity there. I wonder if that's all their fan base gets to eat, are the burgers that they're granted from home wins. If that were the case, man, I bet Miami would be one of the fastest losing, weight-wise, fastest losing fan bases in the league, and losing games too, I guess. So either way, it works out. But yeah, man, Miami was terrible this week, and I'm sure you're going to weigh in here any second about how that went for them. And we will see what happens next as they get ready to take on the Mets again, this time in New York. Then we're going to have 3 more in Washington. So lots of divisional battles, as always, for these Marlins seem to be on the horizon. And then finally, you've got 3 coming up with the St. Louis Cardinals. So 3 more series, 2 against divisional rivals, Dan. The Miami Marlins are trash and sit here at number 29. Only 2 burgers this week. Woe is me. What's your thought on them, buddy, once and for all?
The offense is just so inconsistent, and it showed in so many of these games. I think they actually could have won, Warren. So just sad for Miami. Just sad.
Yeah. Yep. And you talk about the quality of the teams they're facing, you know. One's a world champion, one's those middling Rays, right? And the other is the really powerful Cleveland Guardians. I mean, it's funny they were able to take wins off the world champs and those Cleveland Guardians, but Tampa Bay just took both of them right out from under them. Like, what's the point, man? Miami's not going to be able to, mount enough of a winning streak, no doubt. That this has got to be the last week we really talked about them as the group that they are now. You got to expect guys like, Bell and Berger, some of the Jays you were talking about last week, certainly being on the move. It didn't have to be this way, but it is. And, let's leave Miami there, in the doldrums once again. It's so bad to be a fish out of water for Miami. You're on deck for number 28, even Steven Daniel. Even Daniel doesn't work. Just doesn't.
Odd? No.
It does sound odd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Who's number 28 for Dan the Man Arrow?
Well, man, I'll be honest. It's easy to put a lot of NL teams down here, so let's just keep it going. We're going to say the Colorado Rockies. No surprises. Yep. Don't feel happy about it. At least they're higher than Miami and higher than Chicago, Warren, because they won a game against the Dodgers. Pretty impressive. They lost the next 2, but they won a game on the road against the Dodgers. Pretty impressive. Unfortunately, then they proceeded to get swept by the Reds and then split a 4-game series against St. Louis. So a 3-7 week for the Rockies. And really, what I'm taking away from this is that sweep at the hands of the Reds. As hot as the Reds are, all 3 of those were at home, Warren. And I mean, no excuses anymore,
Right.
Rockies. Like, at least take 1 at home. Come on, we talked about this. If they take
Yeah.
2 of those, Warren, it's a split week for the Rockies. It's a huge difference. So no excuses.
I'm with you, man. This team, they got a series win at home against Philadelphia last week. They got a series win at home against Cleveland last week. And then Cincinnati comes to town and they're the Achilles heel that sweeps you out of your own home ballpark. Like, that's a surprising outcome. As good as Cincinnati is, and guys, they've been great. We'll be talking about them longer down the line tonight. But the Rockies are just, again, not capable of looking like stiff competition, even against the St. Louis Cardinals, who drift around the 500 region, right? They took 2 out of 4 against the Cardinals. Just not a compelling competitor as Colorado, but okay, they can win some games. They did at least get 3 out of their 10 chances this week. So, but they're as bad as they ever have been. Remain in the basement. Why don't you? As we get ready to move on to our next team, and that is number 27. Number 27 for me is the San Francisco Giants. Yeah, I know. They are just up and down, up and down, up and down. But now let's remember that at 3-6, they really needed this week to be one where they stuck their flag in the ground and stated, nope, we are just as prominent a potential contender in this specific National League West, but they couldn't because they dropped 3 in a row to the Yankees at home. Then they went and hit the road and lost 2 of 3 to the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are just no one's, top tier contender at this second. Really confused are they? They're like the Rays of the National League for me all the way. Like, just not sure what the heck they're doing. And then Texas 2-1. They did get that win in the series against Texas, and that's a resounding shot at the world champions, but the world champions don't look like world champions right now and haven't for a couple weeks, frankly. So, I mean, was the shot all that full to begin with? I'd say not. These Giants just are not, rising the way we expected them to. And Dan, how do you feel about it?
You said it, Warren. I mean, there's not much more to add. I think it is worth pointing out we're going to continue our lock onto the Giants to see how the home runs go. And when we checked in last, it was only
Mm-hmm.
at 6. But now, Warren, they have 3 players tied at 8. 8 home runs. What is this? What is this, Oakland or something? This is crazy. But to see Matt Chapman, Michael Conforto, and Thairo Estrada all with 8 home
Mm-hmm.
runs right now, still waiting for that first double digit. I don't know, Warren. Technically, 20's on the table. What do you think?
Oh, well, I'll give them credit that they're spreading out some sluggers here or there. I mean, Mike Yastrzemski and Jorge Soler are still on this roster, and you never know. I mean, Jorge Soler is somebody who can produce and rake in droves once he gets going. And while he's not going yet, I know he's only played 53 games so far this year. There's a possibility that, this team can turn it on. It doesn't seem like expected. It doesn't seem like something I want to put my money on, especially. But at each of them combining now for 24, like, let's see if the 3 of those guys can get 30 combined, and then we'll start talking about maybe one of them pulling it off all by them lonesome. But I'm compelled, man. I'm compelled to think that the San Francisco Giants have runs in them. But tonight, this week, this batch of 10, it was not their time, facing facing teams like New York and Texas, at this stage. I mean, and you get to beat Texas and still flounder to Arizona. I mean, there's just nothing to suggest this team is going to get better against better teams. That's the thing. Can you start beating better teams now? At this stage of the season, we need to see your competitiveness. And I think San Francisco left too much of it in last week's show. Henceforth, why they sit here, sobbing in the 27th spot, my dear friend Dan, which has no S's I can contrive. Darn it. San Francisco, be better. Your division is interesting. It's interesting. Only Colorado is trash, so you should start winning, right? Come on, make it more interesting. Let's go, San Francisco. You can do it. All right, Dan, you're up. Hit another one for me. Who's dying in the next spot?
They're going to go off book a little bit here, Warren, because next up
Mm.
for me, after a really tough week, it's going to be the Minnesota Twins.
Whoa. That's the
Yeah.
Dan with the plucky pick early on. I like this though. Yeah, the Twins. Talk to us as to why, buddy. Because I
You were
agree.
just Yeah, you were just saying, dude, it's about the quality of the wins and your strength of schedule. And the Twins had a 3-6 week. They had 3 games against Houston. They managed to win 2, lost 1. Then they got swept by the Yankees, Warren, and then went 1 and
Mhm.
2 against the Pirates. So 1 win against a weak Pirates team, I think it's fair to say. 2 wins against Houston, fine, that's fair. And then getting swept by the Yankees, just for me, they're not putting it all together. And obviously Royce Lewis is back, and we're seeing that power impact. But we've talked about the lack of consistency in the offense, and even with Royce being back, I don't think that's
Mhm.
gone away. And taking
Mhm.
into account where this team was, they've now fallen to third in their division. They're 8.5
Mhm.
games back. I mean, this matters for a team that was in first place for a long time, right? Uh, it's just all kind of going the wrong direction for Minnesota. This is a week where, fine, you don't win, 2 games against the Yankees, but you take one and then you win the other 2 series. And Minnesota couldn't
Mhm.
do that. So I'm throwing them a little bit down into the river after a week that I think they should have performed much better.
Yeah, they're soaked a little bit. Looking at you a little grumpy too. Minnesota was definitely a disappointing outcome this week, and at 34-31, at only 3 games above 500, they're the team doing their best to look like what, maybe the sixth best team in the American League. They're fighting for spot 6 right now and sitting at it.
Trying.
Yeah, but you're right, Dan. You want to beat the Yankees once in this series to say you
Yeah.
are among the contenders in the American League, and yeah, they didn't.
Yeah.
It-
Because guess who you're playing if you win that wild card, right? Or if you go as the 60, the Yankees.
don't want to get bombed right off the bat, but the Yankees are susceptible to some strong pitching, which is the one thing I think Minnesota has, generally achieved fairly well this year under the radar. That their pitching's done enough to keep them in most games, but they couldn't do it against New York, who gave them 8 runs, 9 runs, and then, on the low stat 5, but it was beating, a little bit of a beating. You need to not get beat like that against the top team in the American League if you're going to be drumming up any excitement about another playoff run for you. So I'm with you. This was a Minnesota Twins team not alike to whom they've been, but I do want to say Pittsburgh is a different team right now. They're riding some fun cultural changes since Skeens came up, so they're not
Sure.
as cruddy as they can be in past weeks. And Houston, I mean, I'll at least say thank you, Minnesota. Taking 2 of 3 from Houston is all I could ever ask for. Thank you. Okay, I'm done with that, at least for now, though I'm super stoked about the end result for Houston this week, I have to say. That one game they played against the Angels, oh my God, could have done so many
Mm.
things. But hey, am I talking about them yet? No, so I'll shut up. Instead, I'm going to target the Washington Nationals for this spot because at 25, I think they were an equally disappointing team this week compared to what I had hoped for them. They did, I will say, serve up a sweep to your Mets. And when I say that, I mean they ate it. They were swept right out of the
Oh, yeah.
Mets, which was great, which is wonderful for you, right? We needed to see you guys turn around, but they also that was following a 2 out of 3 losing situation to Cleveland, right? Dropping that series in Cleveland, who continue to prove how great they are. But maybe their one saving grace is they got their second 3 out of 4 from Atlanta. That's pretty crazy. So, showing you how competitive certain teams are at this moment, that's a huge one for Washington. One that almost makes me regret not putting putting Atlanta here, but they did have a slightly better week after all. But yeah, Washington getting 3 of 4 from Atlanta twice on the road and at home. I mean, I know we're not even at the midway point, Dan, but is there something there? And does it say more about Washington or more about Atlanta?
That's the question, Warren. That's the question, I would say it says more about Atlanta, to be honest. Me
Mm-hmm.
personally, I still would have probably had the Nationals a little bit higher than this because I think anytime you beat Atlanta, it's a big deal. But you bring up a good point. Like we'll talk about Atlanta, I think sooner than we have recently, so we'll get to that. But I understand having the Nationals here. I mean, a sweep from the hands of the Mets or the way that we have been reeling, like you don't want to see that. The Mets
Mm-hmm.
were ripe to have at least two of those games taken just off of where the
Mm-hmm.
rotation landed for that set. So
Mm-hmm.
that hurts a lot. And yeah, the wins against the Braves are great, but then you look at the Cleveland series and you think like, well, where did that offense go that we saw against Atlanta? And yeah, I see having the Nationals down here, Warren, but I think a really good week could go a long way for some of their younger players. We could see some hot streaks start ripping off here from this win streak that they're taking out of Atlanta.
True. I mean, they do have plenty of momentum. Can it carry them through? I mean, up next is a 500 team, I believe, literally in the Detroit
Mhm.
Tigers. So that should be an interesting one. The Nationals at 30 and 35 feel like the better team for me right now, which is what's weird. So I don't know. And then 3 versus Miami. So a great opportunity to continue to stoke some fire. And then wherever Arizona's at for that 3-game series in which they will host Washington in about 7 or 8 days here. We'll have to see what that looks like. I think that could be a very intriguing matchup at this stage because Arizona needs to get going. So this should be a team that they cook. I don't know if they will because Washington's been one of the pluckiest and most interesting. I gotta find a different synonym for plucky. Dan, help me. I need to
Yeah,
find. Keep using.
thesaurus.
Uh, some people call me a human thesaurus, but apparently not Dan.
Oh
Sorry, Dan.
no,
It's only
that's
because.
thumb, Warren. They're calling you a thumb, not thesaurus.
Oh, hey man, don't make fun of my look. That's not very nice. All right. Um,
I don't know what you
but
mean.
I don't know. I feel like the back of a bald head looks like a thumb. Is that not a thing? Am
Yeah,
I
I was
just
just
misreading that?
no, that was the bit, but
Okay. Well, I hit it right on the nose like I always do. Way to kill things, Warren. Way to kill things. How about I called that 25th spot killed? You need to kill the 24th. What do you got?
to the 24th man, and I think it's got to be the Oakland Athletics for a week
Mm-hmm.
where it's just series loss to Atlanta, 1 out of 2, series loss to Seattle, took 1 out of 2, and a series loss to Toronto, took 1 out of 2. I mean, it's about as just low expectations as you could possibly have. 3 really good teams managed to get a win from all of them. I guess that counts for something. That's why they're the last riser, Warren, and they're not
Mm-hmm.
all the way at the top. I mean, this team is just ranking in the wins until they start the sell off, which is kind of fun to see. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but every time I see them play good baseball, just think about these pieces that are going to end up leaving, and kind of sad for Oakland.
Yep, your Rookers, your Geloffs. I mean, everybody's kind of salivating over Mason Miller, though the alleged asking price is supposed to be the farm and then some, it seems
Mhm.
like. So we'll see who thinks they're ready to give up that. But this is an Oakland team that is honestly pretty respectable. You look at where they were last year, and I think it's amazing what they've been able to do with whom they've got. I think it's Mark Kotsay. Is that correct? Is the manager out there? And I hope I'm right, but if I'm
Yeah.
not, I did just watch 3 games of them. So if I forgot already, I'm sorry. I do my best to pay attention to everything, but I mean, kudos to the coaching. All things considered, to get 1 out of Atlanta, 1 out of Seattle, 1 out of Toronto, a team that may actually take a step forward in our countdown this week. I don't know if they'll be the mid will Toronto. It'll be fun to
Mhm.
find out. But point is, Oklahoma, sorry, Oakland is pretty poopy. So we don't need to spell it out anymore. I'm with you, Dan. I can't wait to see everybody fly away and figure out which rosters their burgeoning bats are going to help, and there's some great arms too. Yeah, Urseg and Adams might be on the move. So grab your relievers while you can get them if Oakland's buying, selling, which they definitely should be selling any day now.
Yeah.
So good take. And Oakland, good luck against San Diego next. You got 3, and then you got 4 at Minnesota, which is going to be a tough week for them. I'm sure Minnesota's excited for that. And then you got 2 against Kansas City. And man, Dan, Kansas City's got so much of my respect right now. Like, I don't want anybody to face Kansas City for their own well-being. So, and especially, at least that one will be on at home for Oakland. But yeah, not great,
Still.
not wonderful, not good. Boo. Another new team coming down the pipeline. Yeah, our first to be out of our sinkers, guys. But at this point, the sinker thing is kind of like, which 6 teams obviously stink extra hard this week.
Yeah, we're just
But
kind of throwing a little extra salt on them by calling them sinkers.
yeah, sinkers. That's right. How about San Diego Padres, by the way, while we're talking about them a little bit? I'm just kind of disappointed by this team, Dan. I know. I know you didn't believe me when I said I believed they would be a playoff team, and you're like, Warren, they're clearly inferior. But then they went and got Luis Arias and made it look like they were really caring about this year. And the offense just stops and starts and stops and starts and stops and starts. It's like, man, we keep thinking you got it down. And you've got one of the best batting averages in the league in Luis Arias now. I think he's back to being batting title contender. Good on you, Dan, because you called that. But the point
Thank goodness
is,
he left Miami, dude.
right, so he can have something to play for other than burgers, which I'm sure are pretty mediocre there anyway.
Maybe he's a
But
vegan.
is that real? Or did
No.
you just make that up?
That
Oh,
is-
if you had pulled that out of your butt as a real fact, I would have been like, Dan Harrow, ladies and gentlemen. What a man. But no, fake vegan joke. Okay. But the Padres are hinging on a joke themselves. I mean, they got swept by the Angels, Dan. Who does that? 3 games given up to the Angels? Sorry, sweetheart. It's just not it's not within reason,
Yeah.
Arizona also another split. Arizona's just like such a question mark. You can't be losing to question marks at this stage if you want to be a playoff contender. At least in my mind, man. Aren't we getting close to the time when these games are mattering? And you could see it in the competitive play all up and down the league this week. Like, there are teams that are really playing right now and caring about every win. It just doesn't feel like San Diego's there. And the Royals were their one bright spot. Shockingly, they did take 2 of 3 in Kansas City, which I've just listened to their commentators remind me during our Seattle series that there's something in the water in Kansas City, and when they're at home, they're almost like the Rockies in Coors, right? They're just extremely hard to beat, and I saw it in the evidence of the play.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I'm surprised they got 2 of 3 from those Royals, and that's the only thing they can hang their hat on this week. What do you think, Dan, about the Padres?
Yeah, you summed it up really well. The split against the most mid team in the league in Arizona, I think is pretty fair and reflective. Like, you're right. Imagine if they didn't get a rise. Like, you still have Profar kind of above 300
Overachieving.
essentially. Yeah, but it just feels like he took over that like Soto slot, right? So it's all the same issues we've seen the last couple of years. It makes it feel like the team hasn't taken a step. You just swap out Musgrove for a healthy Dylan Cease and you pretend like everything's the same. I feel like the bullpen is something that needs to be addressed at this point, and the talks around the league, or the Padres are talking to a lot of teams about bullpen help. Chicago, the White Sox, I know that they have a couple people on their list that they're looking for, but at this point, even though it's not their biggest weakness, their closer in Robert Suarez has been a strong point for them. But it's that bridge of getting to him that they've really struggled. And I think a lot of the losses this week could have been wins if they had more support from the bullpen. So I feel like that's an issue that they can address, because you're right about the offense being hot and cold. Strong bullpen can help, support that and give some confidence to them. That's what they need right now.
Yeah, they need something. They need consistency above all. They're back to being a game under 500, and that's just not what I expected from these Padres. So, do I need to say that sentence again? Probably not. And let's jump into our next choice as we sit now high and pretty at number 22. Do we not? I hope it's 22. I think it's 22. Go for 22.
Yeah, so here it's gonna have to be the Tampa Bay Rays, Warren.
Yeah, 100%.
Kind of a weird week. Swept a 2-game series, but against the Miami Marlins, does that even count? I don't know if that's supposed to
No,
count.
we're
And
bored
then,
watching that series.
honestly, 3-game series against Baltimore. they won one, lost two, and then they had the 2-game series against Miami, couple wins, nice little 3-game win streak. Just to
Mhm.
face Baltimore again, could they carry the momentum, Warren? Well, they dropped the first 3, so it
Yeah.
appears not. And so when you look at it from the week standpoint, Tampa Bay went 3-5. 2 of those wins were against Miami. In Miami, which I feel like is Tampa just, that Florida rivalry, Warren. I'm sure it's a thing
Oh.
because the few baseball fans in Florida, I'm sure they watch both teams to get their fill. And if they
Mm.
don't hate one or the other, then at least they can take some solace in some competitive games. Well, I shouldn't say competitive, in some high scoring games, I suppose. And yeah, Tampa Bay buried it on Miami. They didn't allow any burgers, but the performances against Baltimore have been really disappointing. And I consider putting Tampa lower on this list because I feel like the downward trajectory is getting more extreme. The run differential is down to minus 62. The schedule is not getting any easier. It's going real
Mm.
bad, Warren. It's bad for Tampa.
Yeah, I mean, if they actually have the ambition of being a playoff team, like we've been questioning all year, is that even a conversation we're supposed to have? Because the team did feel like they took a step back and were ready for it and embracing it when the season started. And I think the play is continuing to really play that out. Like they're not there isn't a fire lit under anybody. I feel like this is just a team that certainly will get its lumps off. Like if you take a look, their batting averages are well better than Seattle's. We'll just leave it at that, And they can definitely put up a series of runs in spurts, but they're a team that loses its teeth against better squads. First against Baltimore, like you said, and then I guess I have to thank Baltimore. I mean, guys, truth be told, these two teams, Baltimore and Tampa, have one more game to play tomorrow, right? But Baltimore was very courteous and was so kind as to underline which team sucked harder between these two as quickly as possible by winning 3 of the potential 4 from Tampa. And that's not where you want to be, Tampa, unless you're okay with it. And by the way you're playing, I'm gathering you're okay with it. So keep riding the middle to the bottom of the middle is what you're doing. And number 21 gives way. How about another team I love to kick? I love to kick this team pretty hard. And they returned back to earth after actually, I believe, securing a riser spot from us last week. Yeah, top 6 spot. What were they doing, those stupid St. Louis Cardinals? How dare they? They deserve to be right back down here. Yeah, Dan, you gonna bicker with me about it? Go ahead, shoot your
I
shot.
I had them higher, but hey, go ahead, man. Let's hear what you got to say.
Oh, where'd you
Justify.
have them? Yeah, but what, 18? Uh-huh. Just a couple
Actually, I
spots.
had them at 15.
Oh my God, you had them guarding the middle, did these St. Louis
Yeah,
Cardinals?
4 and
Boo.
6. What's the
4 and
problem,
6?
Warren?
It's not 5 and 5. I mean, that's literally the middle. But anyway, 3 games against Philadelphia. 2 of those resulted in losses. That was in Philly, of course. You had to expect that. And then they played 3 against Houston, and they couldn't stop what Houston's been working on. They lose 2 of 3. And then the Colorado Rockies, as we mentioned earlier, actually could only muster a split against them. So just a down week, literally beat by beat, right? You start at the top with those Phillies, get let down. Then you go to Houston, who's doing their best to climb back into a race. You give up some space, and then Colorado just kind of hangs out with you for a couple days. So, I can't expect this to be a better week than that. What do you think, Dan? You're going to tell me somewhere on this lineup, maybe I will. I got to say Nolan Gorman, every single time I pay attention to a St. Louis Cardinals highlight, I'm seeing Nolan Gorman do what we want him to do. Alec Burleson has also been pretty important for this team. And Mason Wynn, while cooling off a tad, has been impressive all throughout. And again, I already ate my words earlier in the season about this guy being a no-name. So hope is there for St. Louis in a division that is obviously the most interesting in baseball. You look at this, all those teams have 30 wins. All of them have puncher's chances, and St. Louis isn't in the basement of this division. Pittsburgh is, which is expected, but again, very interesting division. How do you feel about the Cardinals? Why would you have put them at 15? Friggin' A, Dan.
Because they're moving up, dude, and they're doing what they got to do. I mean, a split against Colorado isn't super impressive, but I'll take a win against Philly. I'm not happy about feeding the Astros. I know you know that. We all know that. No one's happy about that. But I will say that Arenado and Goldschmidt are getting better. Their averages aren't above 250 yet, but they are getting better. You can't complain about the bottom of
Oh.
the lineup when everybody else has their batting average at or above that. So
Hmm.
I can't complain too much. It's still, I see the potential, Warren. Like, the pitching staff is settling. If those guys get going, we've been saying that for a year and a half, then I could see them taking off. So I'm confident and I'm optimistic about the Cardinals, I guess you could say. I seen the swing of the season, Warren, and I feel like this is just the
Hmm.
beginning.
Well,
15.
yeah. These last 10 games would argue because they took nothing but steps back and then stopped to hang out with Colorado right in the mid. So whatever you say, 15, my foot is what I say to you on that. Your next pick better be a doozy because my respect level's like dipping a little bit
Ooh.
right now. I got to look up to you for a minute. Show me what you got.
Don't look up too much. You'll get blinded by the sun.
Oh,
I
but
I don't know how you'll feel about this, man. But for me, this is kind of where I feel like we got to put the Atlanta Braves. They're not in the bottom
whoa.
10. They're not in the bottom 10, Warren. I could have been worse.
Dude, they've been in the 20s, I think, 3 weeks in a row. And I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that's legit. And honestly, Dan, each week I'm actually more and more convinced this is a mid team right now. And I know you all are probably like shaking your fists at me like, you idiot, it's Atlanta. How dare you? But they're not playing good baseball consistently right now, guys. And eventually they deserve the 20th spot. Good call, Dan. But why in your mind?
Warren, this is why people need to listen to our show and they need to listen to what we have to say because we've had the Braves as sinkers for a couple weeks in a row here, right? And we
Mm,
and again here, I say sinkers, but like you said, in the 20s. And we're seeing this downward trend. I mean, I don't think we're really watching the scoreboard or anything, but I look at the NL East bracket a lot, and the Braves are
mhm.
9 games back. Warren, they were in
Yes.
first place for the whole first quarter of the season. They are 9 games back of the Phillies, and the Nationals and Mets are still 5, 6 games behind them, but certainly not out of reach of now fighting them for a wild card at this point. And you look at the offense, and it's just Marcell Ozuna. You mentioned it a couple weeks ago, I think, and I think it's gotten worse. Warren, the Braves
Mhm,
went 4-5 this past week. They
mhm,
won 2 out of 3 against Oakland, and then
mhm,
split a series, 2-game series against Boston, which is kind of
mhm.
weird. The loss was ugly too, and
Yeah.
then
Shut out. 0-9. The
bad
hell?
in
Mhm,
Boston, bad. And
mhm.
then you're gonna go ahead and play Washington in a 4-game series and win 1 out of 4 against them, against one of the weakest teams in the division. I mean, it's just I can't even talk, word. It's so upsetting.
We've seen a lot of teams go and have a bad series in their first matchup with clubs like that 4-game set against Washington. Man, I had it in the back of my mind as a foregone conclusion that Atlanta was going to make adjustments, restoke the heat, and get themselves past Nationals baseball this week, and they didn't. They just didn't. They didn't grow at all. That is concerning, Atlanta fans. This isn't where you want to be. And, we could beat the dead horse and say it over and over again. But, I mean, the writing's been on the wall for a while. Let's make those trades. Let's get rid of some of these veteran bats that maybe strike out too much, like an Adam Duvall. Like, I was excited for them when they signed him, but maybe, just maybe, you can get upgrades in the outfield. There's a lot of sellers. You can call Oakland. You'll probably be okay, right? So like the moves need to be made now, and I think the Washington series really underlined that. I'm calling it. I am calling it, Dan. This time next week there will have been an Atlanta trade, and it
Oh,
will. Yeah, I think it will have happened. They need to make
okay.
a move now. They need to make a move now.
A power outfielder?
A power outfielder is definitely a top nominee for me, my guy. I feel as if pitching certainly can always be bolstered for this group now too, with them giving up runs like we just discussed. I mean, a 9-0
True.
loss, is bad against anybody, but Boston and their touch and go, partially composed of rookie type of lineup, like not what you're expecting, whether at home or not. So, Atlanta, let's figure it out. And you got to do it quickly because you got Baltimore next for 3. You might have some opportunities to get some wins from the Rays and the Detroit Tigers after that. But by then, you need to be getting acquainted with a lineup that's been torqued somehow, worked somehow, figured out somehow. Somehow, Atlanta, It's time for you to remind us why you're a perennial National League contender for that pennant. Hurry up! Hurry up! So angry tonight, Dan. Yeah, I was waiting for you to shoot the Atlanta Braves, and that was a great spot to do it. I'm uh whew, I'm feeling like I want to go with the Detroit Tigers next at a 5-5 week. And there are probably teams out there that hovered around, 4-6 or 4-5 or whatever left, but Detroit is another meh team to me, and I'm still waiting for the identity to smack me. They did go 5-5. They lost 2 to Boston in a 4-game set, so they split there, right? That was in Boston, mind you. Interesting series. Some ups and downs and all arounds. Mostly close games though, which is not what I wanted to see from a Detroit team that thinks they are better than that, right? And Boston too. Both of them needed to beat each other a little harder than this. Texas then gave up 2 wins for Detroit, right? Texas, touch and go, up and down, can beat some teams, but apparently couldn't beat the Tigers. And then Milwaukee was their final opponent. And I was really excited about this series, and I did get to watch quite a bit of it. What an interesting situation to realize, like, first they lose 10-0 in Milwaukee. Then they have a much closer game, losing still 5-4. But then the last game, they finally get through. They finally beat Milwaukee like 10-2. And that's when whenever I see the offense go off, I'm like, that's the Detroit they need to be. Bottle that, underline it, chisel it into stone, memorize it, muscle memory, all those things. Dan, do you think the Tigers can make a habit out of winning yet anytime soon? Or am I putting them in the right place just shy of the 20 spot in our countdown this week?
Yeah, I feel like this is expectations, right? For the Tigers. Like the 5-5 week is not surprising, I
Mm,
don't think, to either of us. And it's about seeing the prospects take the right steps. I think Colt Keith spent some time on the shelf and is probably, good that not good that he is nursing an injury, but good that that's what the issue was, because his numbers have been steadily declining for the last month. So to hear he's been dealing with something, at least it
mm,
provides somewhat of an explanation. And it gives some other youth prospects they have an opportunity who've kind of getting thrown into it right now. And we saw them get overpowered, especially in that Milwaukee series, facing
mm,
big league pitching for the first time. So same problems that we've talked about before at this point for Detroit. I don't think they're going to push through the envelope or anything like that. I don't think they're going to be aggressive at the deadline or anything like that. I think they could maximize more of their roster. And with the 1-2 punch that they have in Flaherty
mm.
and Scuball right now, I mean, who says they can't, go 5-5 the rest of the way here and stay in the conversation more? And I think they have a really good chance of doing at least that.
I I can say that. Yeah, I do feel like the Detroit Tigers are like, one of those boogers that gets stuck on the inside of your nose that you're just like scratching and scratching, and then you're like, oh wow, look, a playoff contender. It finally came. It could happen, sure. I wouldn't pick them literally and figuratively to be a contender this year with what is going on, but I don't think they're sellers, which is too bad because I was about to be like, ooh, Dan, Scooball to Atlanta. You don't
Worst thing
want
they
that.
could do is start selling. So they
Right.
might.
Ooh, well, that would be an indictment of the management. I don't know what your read of their front office is. That'd be another fun conversation someday where we just talk about all these front offices and the dirt we can find on them. But I don't
Yeah.
think Detroit's that stupid. They do have enough young assets that they're a year or two away. They're just not playing great enough to move that timetable up so far this year. But yes, in the conversation. Good call there. Dan, I'm looking for another good call from you. Okay. We're at 18 and dropping fast. Who is next to take a bullet from Dan the Man?
Yeah, this team actually should be probably pretty happy that they're up so high. Let's go with the Los Angeles Angels, Warren.
Oh, dude, I was a little stressed for a second on where you're going with that.
A 4-5 week for the Angels. Unfortunately, they started off with a sweep at the hands of Seattle. Oh my gosh. But don't worry, Warren. They turned it around with a sweep of the Padres, because
Who
that's
saw
not
that
confusing at
coming?
all. But
Right.
then they fed the Astros, Warren, a 3-game series, and they dropped 2. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't put them at 30 just because of all this. I mean, aren't you mad at this team?
I can't do that to Tiffany when they literally won about half their games this week. So I'm glad they didn't have the teeth that they could have. Yeah, my fiance's beating me, guys. Help, help, call the police.
No love.
Um, yeah, somebody's stealing the Angels game. Um, I'm glad they didn't have the teeth they could have had against Seattle. They couldn't even pull off one plucky win. I swear, I'm not going to say that word once next week, you guys. The gauntlet is thrown.
Write that down.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, that's a failed prediction. But hang on. The close game that was game one was a good one. I mean, it came down to a big bomb by Ty France that ended up, being the deciding factor. They didn't have a good game two against Seattle, true. We don't need to focus just on that series. What I'm blown away by is that they swept the Padres. I don't even know how you do that. Simply by
Yeah.
playing poor offense. And you look at the numbers, it was a 1-2 game. It was a 2-4 game. It was a 2-3 game. When your top number's 4, you don't have the bragging rights a sweep should have, right? It's just a silly loss from the Padres. Like, what were they doing? Sleepwalking? And then, yes, it's true. I'm glad. I'm so grateful, dude. I actually need to thank the Angels because I thought they were en route to a sweep tonight to the Houston Astros, which was just the last thing I wanted. So when I noticed that Logan O'Hoppe had hit a walk-off home run, thanks fiance for the call out, I was thrilled because I was this close to having to admit that Houston had just a good week at Seattle, and I was gonna light more lanterns. We were gonna be surrounded by lanterns in this room, Dan. For my YouTube watchers, we were gonna have a seance. We're
Start
gonna have
seeing you casting silver in the background.
though, dude. Absolutely, gotta make them bullets for these Astros. They deserve to die this year. So anyway, I thank the Angels for making sure that the Astros actually weren't that explosively good this week. And so I don't blame you for putting them in 18, and they should be grateful to be that high, though. There is just so much confusing decision making happening all around the lineup, all around the rotation. It's like, it's so weird because, the Angels, they have so many changes going on all the time to their lineup, but the rotation just sits there like, we've been the problem the whole time. Are you going to fix the pitching? No, we're not. We're going to continue to throw subpar arms out there and let our revolving door of offense try to carry them. Gosh, so strange. Washington, Ron Washington, that is scuffling as their general manager. And I wonder if he'll get dividends at all by the end of the year. I just don't know. An 18th spot may be the only dividend they get. Haha. How about another team take an L or two? I'm starting to look for my teams that had losing weeks. Oh, here's one, and I didn't even have to go far. I kept it in the division. That's right. Our world champion Texas Rangers. More
Yeah.
mediocrity, Dan. They go 4-5 this week. They did get a 2-1 series win against the Marlins, so we brag about that not at all. And then they lose a series to the Detroit Tigers, who we've already talked about, and they lose a series to the San Francisco Giants, who we've already talked about. Dan, I'm almost regretting Texas being this high themselves. And that's not a sentence you want to say after a 10-game clip in June. So they get ready for 3 against the Dodgers, 3 against Seattle, 3 against the Mets. And 2 of those 3 teams are hot enough that could be a problem. But your team did gain a lot of momentum, did those Mets, and they could be just an issue. Is Texas gonna have a silver lining anytime soon? I'm at 31-34, and solidly still in second place of the division. I don't know. I just don't know if that'll be the case in 10 more days. I just don't. What do you feel, Dan?
The only boost I could see is that Max Scherzer's working his way back, and that could be soon. And my feelings on that, Warren. I'm honestly not super optimistic on Scherzer, and
Right.
I don't know what exactly that'll do for them, but they need rotation help. The offense is just not what we saw last year. It's just not. I don't think we're going to suddenly see that again. We could see Seager and Garcia both take over, and every team has players that can do that to some extent, right? But I think the pitching side of the ball, they really need to see an improvement. So the Scherzer coming back, and obviously DeGrom on the horizon, that could be a little bit of a boost for this team. I mean, it's worth noting that even though under 500, they got a positive run differential of plus 13. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
broken. It's definitely not all in one piece and pretty and shining like it was in that race last year, chasing the Astros through the end of the year, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not broken. So, yeah, we'll see how they do against the Dodgers. That'll be indicative for it, and against Seattle too. Not the Mets. That won't tell us anything.
I have a lot of players on this lineup I enjoy watching, like Simeon, and who doesn't like, I mean, Corey Seager as an offensive player is just watchable as all hell. And Jonah Heim is one of my favorite catchers in the league, not named Cal Raleigh. So I just keep expecting this story to get a little bit more stable in the direction of Texas looking like a contender again. But I guess injuries to some of their youngins, right? Evan Carter's been down here or there. Wyatt Langford, right, just recently returned from an injury. If again, consistency is still important. Chemistry even exists in baseball, especially on a lineup. And if they can get some consistency of, well, any sort of aptitude, then maybe the Texas Rangers will get to battle back and start looking like a playoff contender again. But I hope they don't against Seattle in about 3 days. So, Dano, that leaves our world champions looking like mediocre bantha fodder. If anybody listens to or knows Star Wars references, I just made one and I'm regretting it immediately. Number 16 is just for you, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're right in the middle, Warren, and the most 500 team I have right in front of me right here is the Boston Red Sox. They have a
Ooh.
33-33 record. They went 5 and
Mm-hmm.
5 this past week, and they did it by splitting every series they played. That's right, Warren. They had 2 4-game series and a 2-game series. 4 games against Detroit, split. 2 games against Atlanta, split, and 4 games against the White Sox, split. They lost 2 to the White Sox, Warren. How are they this high? What are we doing?
We're shooting from the hip and improvising. So if you guys are reading that tonight, you're right. There's just a lot of teams merging around the middle clip of records for these last 10 days. So Boston is the definition of that, my guy. You are so right. If anything, I should have picked them next for it to be the true middle. They're 33-33. So everywhere down the middle, this is like a pair of socks missing its fellow. They've got one perfectly woven sock ready to go and covering up your foot against the cold, and the other one's just it's not there. And at this stage, you don't want to be 50%, right? You don't want to be 50%. You just don't, especially with
And
the
they're going
start you
down.
had.
Yeah.
Right, the trend is downward. That is extremely important for us to reemphasize. And as we look at our team rankings, I mean, we've been loving swooping by these to look at the charts and appreciate how Boston's pitching has been so awfully darn strong, but they are free falling in most of those areas now at fifth in ERA. One of the first non-playoff contenders on that list. Now that's still amazing when you think about the results they've had, but you're noticing they don't have very many saves. They're 25th in the league in saves, which means they're not getting to go into the game late looking ready to win. And that is the wrong position to be in to start pulling out better results. Other than that, yeah, I mean, it's just a mid team. So a good call. And you got to hope health will rebound for this team. I still can't wait. I hope that a Tristan Casas makes an appearance before the end of the season because I would love him to play better. I like him. That's all I could say. But without him on this lineup, this is kind of a boring team to me, even though they've got the big green monster out in left field, giving up plenty of home runs to the enemies around them right now. Mid team are the Boston Red Sox. Stay at a mid team. We'll see you next week to check if you have a pulse yet. It's probably not super likely. Philadelphia, New York, and then Toronto. So Toronto's been an
Yikes.
interesting story. Yeah. Toronto has been an interesting story, but those first 2 series look pretty bad if you are the Boston Red Sox. Where is Toronto? Toronto actually might have to come later still. I know you guys are surprised. We've made it to the mid, and the Guardians of the Mid have gone ahead and relinquished their keys, this time to I have to do it, Dan. The Chicago Cubs. I suppose they're mid, and they really don't deserve to be this week. They could have also taken a bullet a little bit earlier in our talk, I would say, and that's kind of been the theme of the middle. But the Cubs started off our week near the basement last week, right? They were 29th, and now after a 4-5 week, they got walloped by the Cincinnati Reds, and were a big part of why the Reds look so good this week, right, Dan? I mean, first Chicago gives up 2 of 3 in Cincinnati, and then they sweep the White Sox because everybody sweeps the White Sox. Not literally, but you know what I mean, guys.
Not everybody.
I know, not everybody, not them Red Sox. But the White Sox did give up 2 out of 2 potential losses to those Cubs before Cincinnati. Well, makes room for them at home and then beats them 3 out of 4 times, which, apart from that last game, you know, you just didn't expect it. You don't expect it. Cincinnati's looking really, really, really good right now, and Chicago is floundering, maybe even 2 weeks in a row. So at 32 and 34, they're no longer hovering around the top of the division. I think they're 5 games back of Milwaukee now. And dude, I see the one word you put on our notes for the Cubs. Will you say it at all? Will you say it for all of us, I should say? Let us know how you feel about the Cubs.
Yeah, it's gross.
Oh.
Because it's gross, man. Like, this is one of those things where I don't know whether we should praise Cincinnati or just really question the Cubs. Because Justin Steele is back. Warren, he's doing really well. I mean, the pitching side of the ball has been pretty good. The bullpen, we've known about the issues, but yeah, the offense overall is just super unimpressive. They've been having a lot of issues with Christopher Morel at third base, to the point where they have this glut of outfielders. You know, Pete Carl Armstrong is still on the roster. He's done pretty well. Bellinger's back. Suzuki's back. I mean, they're full up. And now they're considering moving, their rookie,
Michael Busch.
Michael Busch, thank you, from first base to third base, and then maybe pulling Cody out of the outfield to go to first. So once you start having all this mishmash, and I mean, it's going to cause issues, right? And I think we're seeing that reflect in some of the offensive performances. And this is Craig Counsell. We know he knows what he's doing, but when we see stretches like this, it also kind of feels like, well, something's really wrong, and with the offense going the way it has, I just remember when all of those rookies, Warren, were doing so well for this team because of all the injuries they had. And we talked about, like, well, these kids, you can't just pull them out of the roster when these other guys come back healthy. Well, they have, and it's not going so well for Chicago so far.
Yeah, it is. It is not. And if you're tinkering like this as much as we're seeing from Craig Counsell, it's because he's freaked out by the result he faced from the Milwaukee Brewers last chance he had. It seems like just a week and a half ago, maybe more, 2 weeks ago, you and I were talking about the Cubs and Milwaukee Brewers matchup like it was heavyweight boxing, and we were stoked for it. The outcome just didn't go the Chicago Cubs' way, and maybe since then, it's been what seems to have triggered Craig Counsell doing a lot of retooling. And to be candid with you, I mean, if continuity makes an impact to teams like the Giants and to Texas and such, it's going to make an impact to this team too. And so I hope he finds a recipe that feels like winning baseball to him enough to settle down, because this team doesn't need to be panicking the way they are, in my humble opinion. Like we've talked about, I still feel like their starting rotation is probably the best in the division on paper. So if they can just take some deep breaths with Shota Imanaga and with Javier Assad and with Justin Steele and with Jamison Tylon, like, breathe. Pitch good baseball games, and the offense will come. It's spoken like a true Seattle guy, but I'm just saying that's how it works. Chicago needs to take a chill pill, okay? And, maybe we did give them a generous spot this week at 17 or 15 with the results they've had, but they have it in them to be a top team. So I'm okay with them still looking like a middle one for now. Okay. 14. 14. We're going fast, Dan. Look how quickly these
We
teams
are.
are melting away. And the ones that are left are largely pretty darn good baseball teams, with some notable exceptions. Are you going to target an exception for us?
I don't know. You'll have to tell me because this team, I kind of want to bury them in the middle because of the two-sided performances that we saw. It's going to be the Milwaukee Brewers. A 5-4
Oh.
week for Milwaukee, a sweep,
Mm-hmm.
a 3-game sweep over the White Sox, which, like you
Mm-hmm.
just said, we're not giving a ton of credit to, and then a
Mm-hmm.
3-game sweep at the hands of the Phillies, and that was Reese Hoskins'
Mm.
homecoming to Philadelphia, Warren, and
Oh.
close games out there in Philly, but Milwaukee couldn't steal even one of them. And then a 3-game series against Detroit, they won 2, dropped the last one. Just a week for Milwaukee, still dealing with a ton of injuries on the pitching side of things. So it's kind of those offensive outbursts where we see them win most of their games because they're giving up a ton of runs. And honestly, if they had won a couple of those games in Philly, they would have been even higher on the list, Warren. And they could have.
You take the sweep of the White Sox away, 3 games, right? And they had a 2 and 4 week, did the Brewers, which is a down week. It's hard to give too much credit, as we said, to a White Sox sweep. So yeah, and Dan, we've talked about it before about we give teams hits when they go head to head with one of their most prominent direct competitors and they fail to make a dent. That has to happen for Milwaukee here when you can't win any of the three in Philadelphia. And by the way, the lauded offense that I love justifying Milwaukee's aptitude with week in and week out did not show up in that series. They were really stifled by the intimidating pitching staff of those Phillies, man. They mustered but 2 runs the entire 3-game series. Not the result you want if you want to feel ready to be a National League power. So, not good. You're right. Punishable. For shame, Brew Crew. You belong down here. Now, it could be okay. We'll see. They do have a chance to take on Toronto, which, both teams have wobbly legs, but Toronto's might be a little stiffer this week. So we'll really want to keep an eye on that one. Then they have to try to slow down the red hot Reds, and that could be tough. And then they get 3 in Los Angeles. That's the Angels, mind you, to lick their wounds. So still an opportunity to have a good week coming up in the next set of 10. I think they could, but they might be a midweek again, mid-team again. And we've talked about pitching being a big concern. If the offense plays like they did against Philadelphia, that's a concern too. So you're right, man. A little strange to have the Brew Crew here, especially as a divisional leader, but they did not have the best week, and they could be on the ropes a little bit, getting ready to get caught by some of the teams behind them. Can they get caught by the next team? Which is absurd that they're the last team for us to discuss in this division or among them. I'm scanning who we have left, and I'm pretty sure they are among the last in this division to discuss. The only one that's not been talked about since or after them is the red hot team we'll talk about later. I'm sorry, I rambled a lot. Guys, Pittsburgh is next. What is Pittsburgh doing? Still alive and well. They deserve lucky number 13 as a punishment so that their fortunes might, twist downward. Like 13's not where they should be, but they did go 5-4 this week, so a winning record. First, they lose a series to Toronto. We keep saying that name. We'll be talking about them shortly. At this point, we have to be. And then they do take a surprising series against the Dodgers, Dan. Maybe that's why they...
The Dodgers?
I know! 2-1 against the Dodgers. And, hey, close game. Close game to open the series, 0-1. I know Skeens pitched in this series. I think it was the second game of the series that they won 10-6. Jones is also playing well, and we've talked about it a lot. Who's their main guy? Helter? Oh, don't hate me. You guys know it's on the tip of my tongue. No, as a pitcher, the pitcher, Mitch Keller. That's it.
Oh, Mitch Keller. Yeah.
So we've talked about how the rotation is stronger than it's been in Pittsburgh as long as I can remember. All of a sudden, right? And the offense can be touch and go And if they can get that consistent bat swinging down, this is a team with some buzz around them for the first time in years. And beating the Dodgers is good reason for that. Oh, but by the way, Dan, then they beat Minnesota, who up until that point looked like a team that was ready to wallop them. So some good results coming out of Pittsburgh. They have St. Louis next, and then Colorado, and then the Red Hot Reds. So they could carry some substantial momentum into that matchup with Cincinnati, and I hope y'all are paying attention because that Central is very close. And even though Pittsburgh's in last place, they have 31 wins. Everybody's pretty close to breathing down one another's necks. Anything can happen, and it shows in what has happened for the Reds in the last 10 days. So, Dan, 13 for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Are you surprised, or does the Dodgers series do it for you?
Yeah, man, that does it. And like the Skeens effect is real, but they're winning more games than just Skeens starts. And
Yeah.
that's what's really encouraging about the team. And you see all the pieces, like you said, like it could definitely see it growing a little bit as long as they hold the fort down. They recalled Henry Davis because Yasmani Grandal has really struggled behind the plate. So they
Mm-hmm.
brought Davis back, and he was with the team last year. He struggled quite a bit, so they sent him down, and might as well give him the playing time, right? Like, why not let him grow? Let this young team get even younger. So
Mm.
super happy to see that. And then finally, I shouldn't say finally, but slowly but surely, Andrew McCutchen, Warren, he's up to 8 home runs, starting
Yeah.
to break out a little bit. It's what they wanted to see from their leadoff hitter. So definitely right to have Pittsburgh here, moving in the right direction.
Yep. Now, hitting wise, one of the least consistent teams at the plate, 23rd in average, OBP 24, slugging is at 26 out of 30 teams, and they strike out a lot, 27. I know I'm not allowed to talk about that as a Seattle fan, but those things, if they can get corrected, see some home run numbers pick up 2 at 23, that's a concern. We've talked about it already. Like, Pittsburgh's offense just needs to get it down, and that's an okay place to be if you're excited about the pitching, and a lot of people are, and I know I am, because when I watch a Skeens pitch, it reminds me of Seattle. Anyway, we've had a couple Skeens for a while, guys, but I'm going to stop gloating. So Pittsburgh at 13 seems a little generous, but if they keep going and beating teams better than them, well, maybe we'll stop calling it generous. And number 12, Dan. Who is next?
Number 12, we're getting up there. I think next, going to have to put the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I think
Warren.
that's pretty important to do that.
Yeah, it's a 6-5 week for Arizona, so not that bad. They had a 4-game series against the Mets that they split, won the first 2, lost the last 2. 3-game series against San Francisco, they took 2 out of the 3. And then a 4-game series against San Diego and a split.
Mm-hmm.
So all these National League opponents, like it's great to get 2 out of 3 from your divisional, one of your divisional opponents. But then the splits against the Mets and the Padres, just really middling. Warren, like I feel like a lot of teams this week, like we've so many, just like a 25 team pool, just in the middle. They're all jammed together, especially in the National League, and things are not getting any tighter. So, sorry, what?
No, I was going to make a point and say you're totally right that the middle is huge, and it really makes the teams that are coming up here that have the winning records, the impressive ones for the week, really feel like heroes when there's so many teams just really in the middle. I'm so bummed that Arizona just isn't growing. Like, they're stagnant is the word I want to use so much. Tell me more if you have any more thoughts. I didn't mean to cut you off with my finger.
No, you're fine. The only other thing I was really going to add was at this point, like, what do you do with Corbin Carroll? Do you send him down? Is it worth even doing? Kind of starting to drag you down a little bit. Not that they necessarily have a hot bat off the bench, but like a lot of their bat benches, Blaze Alexander, Pavin Smith, a lot of these guys are getting on base more than Corbin Carroll is. So I think you have to make that decision at some point.
What's weird is it's you look at their hitting like placements and team rankings, and I know I lean on those a lot, guys, but they tell us a lot. You look at the offensive side of things, and they trend in the upward more than we give them credit for. I mean, 8th in on base percentage, 9th in general batting average. They take the 9th most walks in the league, like right around top 10 in the offensive figures. So what do we get to blame? We got to blame the pitching. There's got to be no other way. I think while a lot of the arms in the rotation seem stable and sound stable, they have a history of being stable in their careers. I mean, somebody's not performing and not performing pretty consistently. And they just got to get better in that area because the bats are swinging appropriately, but their pitching numbers are so much in the red. Just so much in the red. They've only struck out the 29th most batters in the league, right? In team rankings. Let's see. Let's take a look at that. Let's see the number. They have struck out 480 players, better only than Colorado at 423. And that's, I think, where you have to look at the culprit for their problems. Their whip is 1.36, which is another low number in the league, 27. And that's largely where they're at. So for all the offensive figures being just inside the top 10, their defensive pitching numbers anyway are like bottom quadrant of the 20s to really near the basement. Figure it out, Arizona. That's not what you paid your players to be. I mean, is Jordan Montgomery just phoning it in? I mean, I don't even know if he's throwing for this team.
He hasn't found it at all this year.
Yeah.
And it's worth saying, like Gallen, Kelly, and Eduardo Rodriguez are all hurt. So it is just Montgomery, and he hasn't been good. You're right. There's just nobody else to pick up the pieces.
That's it right there. Their farm has been drained, I suppose, to help them prepare for a run. And now they find themselves kind of, well, being outcoached so easily by teams that just planned a little better ahead. Diamondbacks expected to be better than this. We expected them to be better than this. I'm glad I haven't bought a hat yet. That's all I have to say, Dan. I'm glad. Glad I didn't bandwagon with my money. I only bandwagoned with my big mouth. Okay? And it's fallen off for sure. Number 11 for me is such a fun number because this is where I can reasonably and appropriately place my Houston Astro nemesis. You Astros! I just can't. So at 5-4 this week, they took a step forward, but thank God it was just a step. Like I said, I was ready to chalk up this as a 6-3, 10 days for them and say, yep, Houston's back. They're scary. I'm really terrified, and I'm not just playing it up. Truth be told, I'm still pretty intimidated. You look at the offense, Alvarez is hitting homers, Altuve's hitting homers and others, right? Like I'm not in any way, shape, or form less ready to write this team off as I was last week, right? I just feel like they're a hot streak away from really pissing me off. Pardon my French. They did beat Minnesota, or actually, excuse me, they lost to Minnesota 2 games out of 3 this week, which was maybe Minnesota's best bright spot. St. Louis chalked up 2 losses to this team, and then the Angels did 2. Thank God it wasn't 3. But, you know, it's real, dude. It's real. They're 30-36 now. Just 6 games back. That disappears in a heartbeat. We've seen it happen for Cincinnati this week. Dan, I have a right to be afraid, okay? They get the Giants next. They could probably beat the Giants. They get Detroit after that. They could probably beat the Tigers. And then they get 3 games with the Sox. Those ones are white. White Sox. We know what happens.
No, they can't be a riser next week, Warren. They can't.
I think they have to be, Dan. And they're going to play it out that way. Get ready for the next 10 days to be just me going, I told you so. I just hope that we continue to outpace them. But talk to me about Houston. Do they have a chance to avoid being a riser next week?
I think that they do. The injuries have been starting to stack up. Kyle Tucker is the big one that hit the IL. That might be for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Christian Javier and Jose Urquidy both go down. And, you know, Verlander's been pretty good. I'll say he's been pretty good. Better than I gave him credit for what I thought that he would be. Spencer Arrighetti, the guy I said that they left out in his first start, Warren, he's done great in his last couple. So kind of, and Renel Blanco went from being the star of the rotation to kind of the worst of the 5 pitchers, which is kind of insane because
no more sticky stuff.
Weird how that works. It's so
strange.
Much harder.
So much harder to spin the ball. I mean, just ask Verlander, right? Just ask him.
Oh, hey. No, it was actually Scherzer that got suspended for that. But anyway,
Yeah, but Verlander
So,
used to spin the ball faster than any sort of physical
yeah.
aptitude is possible. So keep talking. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet.
No, just the Astros are there, man. They're the real deal. I think that the pitching injuries might catch up with them. The offense is so good, though. I mean, Kyle Tucker going down, you would think it would slow him down, and it really didn't.
Nope.
Finished off the Angels just fine without him. So, yeah, I'm worried with you, but even though the run differential's positive now, they're still far back in 500. You know what, Warren? I'm the division is in your hands. It's up to you
Ooh.
now. The Rangers,
Oh.
we just talked about their topsy turvy, but Houston's not looking up at Texas. They're looking at you. They're looking at
Ooh.
Seattle. So it's
I
up to you
know.
guys now to hold
Oh.
hold Houston back.
And we're gonna do the best we can, guys. The tide is strong, and I can feel it rising for us. But we'll save Seattle for Seattle. Let's pay credence to another team. But yeah, Houston has every right to be looking at us like, who'd have thought? But I know I'm respecting them every step of the way because I just can feel them being the sixth team in the playoff. I can just feel it, and maybe even more. I mean, Seattle is not impenetrable. We know this. We'll talk about it in a bit. But not before Dan gives me number 10, which I hope wouldn't be Seattle, but we'll find out.
I'm not going to do that to you, Warren. I'm not going to do that. No,
Okay.
instead, I think here I'll put the Los Angeles Dodgers at the number
My
10
God, you
spot.
just love sliding them in like a knife through ribs. You're just like, bleed out. Sir, you're right. I mean, objectively, guys, they had a midweek again, 5-4. Talk about it, Dan.
Yeah, 5-4 week, 3 games against Colorado. They took 2 out of 3. Uh, that wasn't at Colorado. Those were home games. So no excuse there to give Colorado a win. Come on. And then dropping 2 out of 3 in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
That's expect a little better there. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Skeens was one of those, but not both of them. And
Mm-hmm.
then trip to the Bronx. They lost the first 2 games. Wasn't looking good in the last one, but the Dodgers squeaked it out to prevent. I'm sorry, the Yankees squeaked it out to prevent the sweep at the hands of the Dodgers. But pretty good performances, a powerhouse matchup we saw. I don't know if you saw any of that,
Oh,
Warren, but Dodgers Yankees. Oh my gosh! And we didn't even get to see Soto. We didn't even get to see how big that could have been.
oh, you're right. And Dan, I did. I watched. I think I watched 2 of 3 of those games, pretty adequately. Just on the edge of my seat, waiting for something to break open and break through. Talk about iron sharpening iron. Let's make no mistakes. The Dodgers won that series against the Yankees, and they are, without a shadow of a doubt, everybody's target at this point. Because how do you beat a team that can make the Yankees, who we'll talk about in a bit, like they were having literally a perfect week up until that point, until they ran into the Dodgers buzzsaw. If you can make the Yankees look like they got caught with their pants down right now, you're the best team in baseball. So even though they sit at number 10, make no mistake of how real the Dodgers are. We're just having a little bit of fun because we can. All right? You can't drop a series to Pittsburgh and not get buried at least up to your ankles, just a tad.
Shut out
Um,
one of them, Warren, too. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you can't have that. Can't have that. You gotta score runs when you've got like you look at the top 5 of this lineup, Dan. You've got Mookie,
not fair.
and you got Freddie, and you got Shohei, and you've got Will Smith, and Teoscar Hernandez has been playing good. He's
Really
been
good.
he's been playing so good.
15 home runs.
Stop saying stuff that makes sense. He's so good. 15 home runs, guys. He's got 81 strikeouts, 5th best in or highest in the league, but I'm barely counting at this point. I only say it because we started it and I like consistency. I have an OCD tick for it or something, which is strange because you'd think my rankings would kill us every week. But yeah, this is the scariest team in baseball. They're going to prove it again. They get the world champs next. I bet they'll sweep them. And then they get 3 in Kansas City. And I know what they're going to go through. And I want all of you guys to watch that series because it's going to be good baseball. And then 4 at Colorado. So does Colorado shock them and pull something out of the genie bottle, or I don't
Still
know.
got to
I
win one, Colorado. I don't care
gotta
if
win
it's
one.
Dodgers. Got to win one.
Gotta win one. Can they? We'll find out. But the Dodgers are scary. We're just having some fun. They can enjoy the 10th spot. They won't they won't have too many more opportunities to be this low, I would think, as the season progresses. Only one team left is technically mediocre this week, Dan. And you know me, I'm a stiffler for the record. I should put this team next. I have to put this team next. And that's why I'm going to swerve you, and I won't. I'm going to talk
Oh,
about the Cleveland Guardians instead. I'm going to talk.
wow. A
Yeah.
green team, Warren? Are you okay?
So to let you guys know, lots of teams have winning records from here on out. Only one doesn't. They still won more games than they lost, but it was more in the middle of it. But the Guardians, I think, had the kinder schedule and didn't quite pull off the emphatic results I hoped for. So yeah, Dan, I'm breaking my own conceived pattern. Talk about not really having OCD, but that's a whole nother thing. Guardians went 5-3. They took 2 of 3 from Washington, and that was in Washington. Great road warriors, it seems like these Guardians are. And then they were in Kansas City themselves, and even they couldn't sweep them, but it was only for 2 games. They split with the Royals in Kansas City. Tough games both ways, both closer than scores might imply. And then Miami welcomed them. And of course, Cleveland made sure they only got 1 burger out of that set, too. So Cleveland is a great team. I absolutely have them circled, underlined, and in italics. They're a top 4 team in the American League and likely playoff contender. I can't imagine them. Again, it will have to be ripped from them at this point. They play so good. I love Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan together, and I know you do too, because it's the perfect combo of contact, power, proficiency. They're so good together. Great 1-2 punch. I love these Guardians, but I will surprise us all and put them at 9th. Talk about them, Dan, because you know I love them.
The starting pitching is kind of exposing them a little bit, and I only say
Mm,
as in like it's the only kind of obvious weakness. Like
right.
I imagine what this team could have been if Shane Bieber was healthy, right?
True.
Their bullpen, Warren, is insane. First in
Mm-hmm.
so many categories in the league. Their relief pitchers, first in ERA, first in WHIP, first in walks per nine, first in hits per nine, home runs allowed per nine. Warren, they're just crushing all these categories. I thought that I was like there was a smudge on my monitor, Warren. Emmanuel Clase has a 0.3 ERA. I mean, to go along with 19 saves and 31 strikeouts and 30 innings pitched. Unreal. Unreal. If this team makes a couple trades for starting pitching, I will be
Yeah.
terrified for everyone in their division. Like, and I picked the
Mm,
Royals. We both know about the Royals now, and
yeah.
I'm still scared of the Guardians. Like, it's they're just doing everything right, and the weaknesses are not overpowering them. We've said it a couple times, but like the rookie manager is on a great like level playing field with his players to the point where he rarely mixes with the lineup, but where they have dealt
Mm-hmm.
with injuries and have mixed things up, like the guys are performing really well. So yeah, Guardians deserve to be up here.
Yeah, man. They're better than 9th, and I was having some fun too. Um, because I didn't want to talk about that one team that's sitting right there in the middle. Do you want to next, Dan? I mean, you're the one who could talk on them better. I know I'm building it up so
Well,
much. What do you got?
well, Warren, I love driving you crazy, but if I'm gonna stick to the rankings and who I think belongs where, then I think the next team has to be the Kansas City Royals.
I knew it. There's my mid team. You had to do it. I could put this team in the top 5 despite their record this week because I have so much respect for their game after the series they just had with Seattle. Ballsy to put them here because they're good, man. This is such a good team, especially at home. Talk on it.
Yeah, exactly, especially at home. But they are a dual threat. They're dangerous everywhere. But they had a 4-4 week, so can't say too much of success. They started off against the Padres. They only won 1 out of a 3-game series, and then in a 2-game series with Cleveland, should have been 3, but we had a rain out. Split that, so lost the first one, won the second one. And a 3-game series against Seattle, which Warren, they took the first 2, and no sweeps, though. So for me, for Kansas City, I think that they probably look at this as a week of some missed opportunities. Some of those
Mhm.
games in Seattle, and I'm sorry, against San Diego were very winnable. Lost Waka,
Mhm.
unfortunately, in one of those games.
Uh-huh.
That's tough. And they've had so many. I feel like the Royals, especially, have had so many comebackers come at them this year. It's scary, honestly. But uh,
Mhm.
couldn't get a full series out of Cleveland, and then the Seattle one was a battle, which I know you have more to say on, Warren. But for me, Kansas City, I think it's fair to have them up here. I think that they're doing a great job trying to gun it out behind the Guardians, and they're going to stick with it.
Oh man, I'm surprised they would drop a series to San Diego, as we talked about earlier. That first game was such an offensive fireworks show too. Like they really went at each other, and kudos to San Diego for being able to come out on top, because when Seattle tries to go head to head against them, offense for offense, predictably, Seattle came up short 2 out of 3 chances. Every single step forward Seattle took to try to win those games, Royals matched them. And, sometimes you waited innings for it, so you get a little comfortable, but no, they are so good. I mean, Vinny Pasquantino, I've talked about him myself. I know I've talked about him a lot. They've got this fun thing in Kansas City. I don't know if we talked about it on the show yet, where if he gets a base hit or does anything powerful for the Royals in a positive way, a gentleman dressed up in a Sasquatch costume marches out from a curtain over by the Kaufman, scoreboard.
That's not a
And
gentleman, Warren. That's Sasquatch.
shut up, Dan. Okay.
You saw him.
I'm Sasquatch compared to that man. Anyway, this man marches around and just looks around and goes back away, but it's their little gimmick, and it's good for baseball in Kansas City because it's not just about Witt, it's not just about Perez. There's a lot of people doing what they need to do for this team to be better than they've been in years, and they still bat at the plate with aggression. They're still hungry. They just do not lay off what they think they can hit, and they are capable. So strong are these Royals. I was really on the edge of my seat watching this series. It was some of the most competitive baseball I've seen all season, some of the most fun to watch, and I was so proud of us for getting even one of the 3, because in Kauffman Stadium, I really thought Kansas City was going to be the first team to sweep Seattle this year, and I was ready to embrace it, especially with Cole Reagans on the mound for Game 3. The matchup looked terrible. So amazing that we were able to get a win over them, and the Royals are fully respected and honestly right up there with the Yankees, Orioles, Guardians. This team's a playoff team. Get ready, Kansas City. Someone has to take it from you, and I don't think anybody's ready to do it. Good for you. So cool to see. And you are a tough out. Holy cow, what a series. Oh, I'm shocked you would put them here, Dan, because I know how much you cheer for them and root for them and pick them to win the division. I was curious if you'd do it. But there's a team that we usually put right in the middle of our rankings. We call them the Guardians of the Middle, or the kind of the Mendoza line of Suck-itude. We've never said that, but we should, because it sounds great on a t-shirt. There's our quote for the week, guys. It is the Toronto Blue Jays I must address next at long last. We've talked a lot about them in a positive light this week because they did go 6-4. They did have a good week. First, they beat Pittsburgh. Yeah, the same Pittsburgh that beat the Dodgers. 2-1, that is. Not a sweep, but, I don't know if Toronto swept anybody so far this year, but that'd be interesting to look up. Baltimore was next. They were on the road for that, or no, at home, excuse me, and split it 2-2. They lost the first 2 and then figured it out and played much closer with those Orioles. And I look at that right there, Dan, those outcomes. They lose the first 2 7-2 against Baltimore and 10-1. Okay, those are blowouts for Baltimore. And then Toronto's able to rebound and win the next 2 2-3 and 5-6. I mean, you can't get much closer than that. That's encouraging at long last for Toronto to battle back and salvage that situation before moving on to Oakland and taking 2 of 3. So, also I will say. A little bit of a sad note for me. One of the players on Toronto finally was DFA'd and let go. It was Kevin Biggio. Talk about a legacy name who's going to find a new home. This guy isn't a terrible player, in my humble opinion. He's been in kind of the back of the bench for Toronto for the most of about 2 years. He really was only a big part of their playoff run, I'd say, in 2022, and since then has kind of ebbed back. How do you feel about Toronto, Kevin Biggio's shift, where they're at now at this stage of the season? You had to expect this to be a good week at long last for them, or they were going to fall out, right? We are going to call them done next. How do you feel now, Dan?
I mean, they needed this week, but they need a lot more weeks like this, right? To keep it
Mm-hmm.
going consistently. Like we saw Kikuchi get some contact in the field. That might not be good for them, and they need the pitching to really help support them in this. Funnily enough, Warren, they have not swept the series this year, and they've also not been swept. So, I
Oh,
mean, there's that.
there's competition. I was thinking Seattle might be the only one without a sweep, so that's interesting to know. Toronto and probably more. I just haven't, paid the closest attention, but good call. Any more?
There's really not. I guess Vladdy's been showing his power a little bit more. He's up to 7 home runs, getting that slugging percentage up a little bit. Good to see, but you know, I don't know
You heard
why
my sigh, right?
Why Biggio and not Varsho or somebody like that, Warren. Like
Hmm.
why? I feel like they could have done it better
Well,
in there.
I don't know. Dalton Varsho does have a 2.8 WAR this year, right? Like he's been maybe their best bat, honestly. Um, and I'm not
Well,
just saying that to troll you. I'm just saying. I mean, the WAR
uh,
is 2.8. It was better. No one.
okay,
Isaiah
he's hitting
Kiner Falefa has a
215,
2.1.
so
Well, I mean, most of the players on this lineup is replaceable, right? Like most of these guys, you could
Turner and
shuffle and
Vladdy getting up there though. Gotta say, getting a little better.
Justin
And
Turner.
Bo,
Justin Turner is not the future of this team. Poor, I
no,
mean, good for him, proving how much he has left in the tank at what age 40 or so. But
yeah,
we've been talking over and over again like it's poop or get off the pot for these Toronto Blue Jays. At least they squeezed one out this week. That's what we get to
yeah,
say, and that's the closest positive thing we can say for our top 8 or 7 team at this point. 7, 6,
yep.
7. Okay. But Toronto needs to continue to find that stability. They can't take any more steps backward if we really are being serious, at least in my mind. They sit at this moment at the record of 32 and 33, still right at 500. Amazing for being as lukewarm as they've been. They've literally been so invisible as far as making moves up and down the ladder. They get ready for 3 in Milwaukee. They get 3 at home in Cleveland against Cleveland, and then they host Boston too. So 2 of those 3 sound tough, and Boston might prove to be an issue, but maybe not. So let's see what Toronto does. This is a huge next 10 days again for them. If they're green again next week, maybe they get to breathe for a minute, but they've certainly done a lot to earn some credit this week, if you don't mind me saying, by getting some wins. They just needed some wins, for goodness
Yeah.
sake. 6th spot, sir. Our risers are nigh. Lots of familiar team names coming at you, but a couple that won't be familiar at this stage. Oh, Dan, who you got for number 6?
It's been a while, man, but it's time. Number 6, the New York Mets. As our riser again. Let's go.
Yeah,
We'll take
good
it.
stuff.
6-3 week. We will take it. 4-game series against Arizona was split. We won the first 2, lost the last 2. 3-game series against Washington was a sweep, which was kind of awesome. We talked about how Washington has kind of been gritty to play against, so that was really clutch to win those games. And a couple days off before the London series, which obviously ended in a split. Lost the first one to the
Mm-hmm.
Phillies and won the second one. Really close, tight second game where the Mets had the lead. They gave it up to the Phillies in the 8th. They took it back in the 9th. Is fun, exciting, and the big news that's kind of carried the Mets over this last week coming out of that
Mm-hmm.
series against Arizona and a really bad couple of weeks we've had the last few. The moves that we made, when we talked about Brett Batty being sent down and Mark Vientos getting more playing time, he's
Mm-hmm.
been hitting excellently ever since he got called back up. His batting average is over 300 now, 314. Incredible. I kind of I think I may have cut out the part where we talked about Luis Torrens last week in the audio portion
Aw.
of the podcast, even though it was a funny little bit. But it shouldn't have, because oh man, Warren, Luis Torrens has been invigorating the offense for this lineup. It's been all the back of the lineup. We're still seeing the same issues with Alonso and McNeil and Lindor. It's all these other guys. It's like Bader and Martinez and Marte
Mhm.
getting on base, and then the back of the lineup and Torrens in the 9th spot. It has been mostly hitting 2 home runs already, Warren, getting on base. I mean, he had some contact in the last game in London in against the Phillies, so hopefully he's okay. But
Mm.
yeah, these guys have just these moves that Stearns had made for the Mets have just kind of breathed life into them. And this is with the pitching staff still kind of struggling, to be honest. With Senga now pushed back even more, we might probably won't see him until the All-Star break at this point.
Ah.
Like this is really nice little swell that the Mets needed, because everything I was reading about the Mets was just who we were selling. And you know what? We could put that away for just a minute and try and win some games and maybe put ourselves in a better position before the deadline.
On you for having some optimism. You are only back 8 for all of the dirt we've had to kick on New York for good, couple of weeks. The truth is that they are a hot streak like we are seeing from Cincinnati away from capitalizing and being in the race again, especially with not a whole lot of competition in the National League East, if I'm being honest. If Atlanta continues to trend downward, there may be a surprise spot at second place for these Mets if these moves continue to pay dividends. I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for Luis Torrens for giving you some contact that matters in a positive direction. I did say his bat had improved since he had left Seattle, so I love seeing that it's coming, and I'd love for him to earn enough play time to feel like an everyday player in the league. Why not? I root for everybody. pretty easy that way. Anyway, love to hear it. Love to hear a rebound. You know your team best. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know better. I'm just glad to hear that for a week you feel like you can breathe and you got to win some quality games. I mean, you did sweep Washington, who have won 6 of 8 from Atlanta. So
Yep.
There's something in there. There really is something there, especially when you think about the fact that you're on the road in Washington for that sweep. Most teams don't like to get swept at home. And then the plucky. I swear to God, I'm gonna kick myself every time I say plucky. But that very compelling win to close out the London series is just a great sign. Good for international baseball, perspective too. All these fans who don't get to watch you every day now think you're just as good at the Phillies if you try. So
Hopefully.
yeah, man, this is good. I'm really happy for you. May it be something that gives way to better momentum. We have only a few teams left, friends. And honestly, Dan, because you just threw out a 6-3 team, I feel compelled to try to find a 6-3 team to match that with. And, lo and behold, I've got one. There they are. Huh. How about the Seattle Mariners?
Oh, hey.
Yeah, they could be top 5. And honestly, I hope you guys aren't mad that Seattle tends to be near the top of these countdowns. I mean, to be fair, if they had a crappy week, I'd call them out a lot faster. But, I mean, this week could have been crappy. It almost was. I didn't
Hey,
want to
man,
get swept.
remember, like we did have them lower about a month and a half ago, and this last 4 weeks of having them higher has coincided with them going from what, third, fourth in the division to first.
Yep, it's true. So certain things are staying strong, and that's generally our pitching. We all have heard me laud about most of my guys, but have I really talked enough about Brian Wu? If you guys
No,
aren't, no, I really haven't. Well, Brian Wu, who came off the IL just a few weeks ago, and it has had I think it's 6 starts so far. Yes, 6 starts. He's been pitching lights out for us, even better than the other guys. At a 107 ERA to get us going here through 6 starts, and an 0.53 whip. He's playing so good, and this guy looks like an assassin. If you've watched him talk about his game or play it, he is so competitive with himself. He hates failure. He hates anything perceived as failure. And he's pulling off some magic tricks with the baseball. He's not failing a lot. He reminds me a bit of baseball's Shin Lim. He's got this great hair and he runs his hand through his hair all the time, just like Shin Lim. If you don't know who Shin Lim is, he's a magician. He's got no right coming up in our conversation, so I'll move away from the reference.
More of a Matt Franco man myself. Okay.
He smiles a lot more. Shin's too dramatic, but that's the thing. So is Wu. Wu is a dramatic pitcher, and he's really taking his starts seriously in a major way. And not to say the others aren't. I mean, we don't have a pitcher in the rotation, starting rotation anyway, providing above a 4 ERA. Everybody's in the 3s. I'm really proud of us in that way. I mean, I've been spoiled, as I've said, Dan, coming up as a Seattle Mariner fan, as watching it, because I don't understand how good I have it. And I have to say thank you every once in a while. They have been doing a good job, but they're not perfect. They give up their knocks, and it shows in their record, because this week, while we did sweep the Angels, as we mentioned earlier, we did give up 1 of 3 potential losses to Oakland. Whatever. Plus side there is Mitch Garver started getting going. I've been waiting for that. He's been our new signee at designated hitter. He's also been catching a little bit, especially for Kirby's games. He and Kirby have some real chemistry. So Cal has let Garver take that spot and be a catcher a little bit more for Kirby, and that's cool to see. And then Kansas City, like I said, epic series. I won't rehash it too much. Really thought we'd lose it. And we did lose the series, but we got the 1 win to give us that 6-3 record. Love it. I'm happy. As far as looking ahead, we now get 4 with Chicago. That's the White Sox. So yay, free wins. Come and get them. Yum, yum. I'm hoping I don't eat those, by the way, eat those words next week, but I'm assuming we'll be okay. And then we host Texas, and then we move on the road to face Cleveland. And that is going to be my favorite test to look forward to this upcoming week, because Cleveland is just as tough to beat as Kansas City, if not more, just as tough as Baltimore, just as tough as New York. How do you feel about my Mariners, Dan? You want to give me any credit?
Absolutely. I would have had you guys higher even. I mean, I know dropping those games to the Royals hurts, but admirable week this week, and only losing 1 in a tight game to Oakland is nothing to be ashamed of. And we've talked about how good the Royals are, so I think Seattle's moving in the right direction. I am curious, 2 things for you, Warren. I'm curious if you think Julio's really finally breaking out of it, because it seems like he's been better than he was for the first start of the season. I know he's not quite at that level you probably expect him to be. But then that, and if you could tell me how you feel about Ty France going to the IL and one Tyler Locklear stepping into his place. Any ideas about him?
Cool. We'll take it in baby bites, starting with Julio. Julio's Savant page reflects a better player than I think the lack of power in his game is suggesting, right? So, no, he's not been J-Rod show with the bat in his hands in terms of power, but he's coming out of it in that he's making contact, he's hitting base hits, he's looking more intentional with the bat. I think since we dropped Brant Brown, the offensive coordinator / bench coach, I think there's less on these guys' minds, so they're not overthinking things as much. I guess the feedback I was reading was that Brant Brown was too focused on strategizing in a broad sense, right? Everybody go out and take 2 strikes and then start swinging, maybe like that, instead of everybody getting individual attention. And you're seeing it get better already. Now, it's not perfect. We are still to do as I'm supposed to do, guys. We are still the highest strikeout team in the league, and I'm still ashamed of it. 659 strikeouts is the highest in the league by a good 20. Oakland and Boston are starting to catch up, but, I think by the end of the year, I legitimately expect us to not be the worst, but it's been ugly, and I know it. But I think the guys have less on their minds. It's getting a little bit more fluid to see them, and they're getting a little bit more intentional. They still strike out plenty, so we're getting better, but not great. And then you asked me about Tyler Locklear. So I've heard lots of buzz about Tyler Locklear doing a lot of good things in minor league baseball to get their season started. He started off hot in Double-A, so they promoted him to Triple-A. He continues to play well, and it started to be like, hey, guys, bring him up. and now Ty's fractured heel, we understand,
Hmm.
is what has allowed this to happen. And he already got his first RBI tonight, already got his first hit. So good for you, Tyler Locklear. I'm excited to watch him more, Dan, because from one Ty to another, I actually haven't seen a ton of Locklear's play. Seen a lot more of France's, and I was super excited about the direction he was heading in. I no longer wish for him to be on the bubble for trades at all out of Seattle. I think he can be the first baseman that helps us get back to the playoffs with the changes he made to his swing over the offseason. And I hope his time on the IL is brief. But I'm
Sure,
stoked
heel
to see
could
what.
be.
Yes, it could be something that makes it tough for him to beat Ty France again until deep into the season, maybe more. And then you look at Locklear. I'm just excited to learn more about what he can do. The rumor has it he's got the power. Rumor has it he's got the contact, and he's a young gun, and he could be a first baseman of the future if he performs well. But that's a lot of coulds. Still too early to tell. But you came in, made your debut, and got an RBI against the team that we really needed to beat today. Good on you, kid. You're off to a great start. I'm not mad yet. But yeah, I hope those answered your questions, guys. Go Mariners. I'm thrilled about where we're at. We are +7 and getting ready for some key series here. If we can keep positive momentum going and Astros continue to fall back, I'm going to only wear brighter and brighter versions of teal for you, Dan.
Love it.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you. So with Seattle out of the way, we have 4 teams left. 3 of them you guys can probably name off the top of your head because they're those guys in the league. But there's a 4th team who's going to bust into the top parts of our countdown like nobody's business. Do you remember who it is, guys? Maybe Dan will call him out next. Dan, will you? Who's number 4?
Number 4 for me, man, it's got to be the Philadelphia Phillies.
Ooh, so
Not a top
no.
3 team. No, not yet.
Uh-huh.
6-2, the Phillies went, and this is, a
Mhm.
reflection of strength of schedule for me. They had a 3-game series against St. Louis. They won the first 2, dropped the last one. Then a 3-game sweep of Milwaukee, which we already kind of talked about a little bit. So pretty
Mhm.
strong start there, and then a split in the London series against the Mets. We talked about that last game was kind of in their hands twice over, and they let it slip away. So
Mhm.
still, hey, we're at number 4. Good week, but I would argue that some of the teams above the Phillies here on our list had tougher schedules and had better results. So, main thing I'm going to take away from the Phillies is that Trey Turner is working his way back. He'll be back soon. Yes, that's right. Trey Turner hasn't been on the team this whole
Right.
time. He's been hurt. It's
Right.
insane. Yeah, so just that and the fact that now, like we talked about Ranger Suarez, we talked about Nola and Wheeler doing really
Mhm.
well. Well, Christopher Sanchez has joined the show, Warren. Now they have 4 pitchers that are in the last 7 days in the top 20 ranks of starting pitching. I mean,
Oh my
unreal
god.
the talent they're having coming through their system. Their bullpen is still one of the best in the league. I mean, their offense ranks top 5 in almost every category, 6th in home runs and average. Like it's just on and on and on. You already know they're going to get better once Turner comes back. They finally have Merrifield almost exclusively on the bench. He struck out in a big at bat in London too. Oh, and also I think that the Phillies might be the new favorite team of every team in London because
Ooh.
good games for both of those, especially the dominant one in the first one of the London series. But Bryce Harper hitting that home run and then kicking the soccer slide, the football slide, he won
No.
over a lot of fans in the UK with that whole thing.
Oh man, the Vegas boy does it international in order to grow the game with a memorable moment. Yeah. I love the Phillies, man. I think this is the team to beat in the National League unless things start changing pretty dramatically. And the statistics say that, and they're racing ahead of Atlanta in a way I don't think we expected. But you look all up and down the lineup, and it's quality players doing excellent work on the field with the bat in the hand. And the pitching staff is just, yeah, stacktastic. Stacktastic. Um, I, I think JT Realmuto is probably one of the Phillies I talk about least, but want to say has been playing really, really well, especially recently. Bryson Stott's another one of the players on this roster that I haven't talked about enough that I know is a piece of the future for them, a cornerstone, if you will. There's just war bleeding out of this team. 2.3 is the high mark on the offensive side for Bryce. But who is Edmundo Sosa, sir? And how does he have a 1.9 WAR? How have I not put this guy together? He's only played
Turner's replacement.
He's played only 36 games as Turner's replacement, guys, at shortstop. He's got a 294 average, a 358 OBP. He's slugging 532, same as Harper, okay? His OPS is 890. Who are you? Who are you? And can I have you?
When they asked him to step in for Trey, I think he took it a little too seriously.
Yeah.
Oh, you want me to do all of his numbers? Got it.
Jesus, it's amazing. And credit, I mean, all things considered, to the coaching staff over in Philadelphia for creating this juggernaut. And you want to talk about all the teams we walked into this season discussing having a chip on their shoulder. It was probably like half the league. The only one that is as sharp as we expected it to be seems to be these Phillies. Maybe New York Yankees too, but whew,
Sure.
the chip is huge. So amazing stuff. I love knowing that Philadelphia is speeding ahead of the rest of the National League and leaving the rest of us a little bit like, whoops. How did we not know that was going to happen? And Dan, at this rate, maybe Bryce Harper will win the National League batting title. I know he now has to go through a rise again. That's your pick, and if you win, good for you. But hey, Harper's playing out of his mind. And I'm not usually a Harper fan, but I am a fan of good baseball, so I have to override that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, the Phillies are a good team, but not who I expected you to pick in this scenario. So I might as well pick another team. I'm going to force your hand eventually. How about the Baltimore Orioles can be our next team? At number 3, they actually had the most losses out of the 3 teams left on the board this week. They only had 3 to go along with their 7 wins. But the Baltimore Orioles, that, like I said, you forced my hand, got to be at 3. They took 2 of 3 from the Rays, as we discussed earlier, and took the first 3 against the Rays again. And they'll play one more with them tomorrow in Tampa. In between those 2 series, though, you may recall they split a series with Toronto in very dramatic fashion because they looked great in the first 2 games, and then Toronto made adjustments, as legendary as that seems to be, right, for a Toronto team that seems to stagnate. And that did cause the Orioles to drop 2 to Toronto. They're now still 42-22, guys, so please don't stress. With a run differential of plus 101, this is obviously one of the best teams in baseball. A collection of youth performing at a level we're not used to discussing in any way, shape, or form. A lot of young guns on this team, and everywhere you look, there's somebody else getting attention for something who we've never really talked about before. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know who it was this week, but this is a great team. Jordan Westberg maybe is having the most surprising positive season for the Orioles amongst everybody, but you can look up and down the lineup and appreciate them. I like Ryan O'Hearn, another young guy I don't think I've talked about enough on this team. James McCann does his part from time to time. Not great with a negative .04 WAR, but I'm just saying, there's guys we haven't talked about yet. Anthony Santander is somebody on my eye on. Ryan Mountcastle, of course, has got his 1.8 WAR so far. What's to say about Baltimore we haven't already said? We were celebrating, Dan, earlier how 3 Toronto Blue Jays have 8 home runs. Yay. Gunner's got 20. Okay, he's 4 away is Gunnar Henderson from eclipsing all those, Toronto Blue Jays with their 8s. It's just wild.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They have 5 with double digits, and O'Hearn has 9. So soon to be 6. Yeah, you're right. It's crazy. And I still think the strength of this team might really be the pitching because their bullpen is solid, obviously, with Kimbrel holding it down at the back, but they've got middle arms that any other team would take as the primary closers. They called up Cade Povich, and he got a little roughed up in his first start, but they're running that 6-man rotation, giving a little bit extra rest. Like they're approaching the season the right way. They're getting these gutsy wins where they need to get it. They
Mhm.
do have the most losses at anybody up here, but I still think that Baltimore is one of the most impressive teams. And like certainly in the way that you want to say maybe the National League, we've got the Dodgers and the Phillies. The Braves just kind of exited that conversation. To me, in the American League, it's the Yankees and the Orioles, and to have
Yeah.
them in division is even more exciting. I can't wait to see them play each other, Warren, because as good as Yankees Dodgers was, Yankees Orioles is going to be straight
Ugh.
up playoff preview stuff.
I'm with you, man. That's so true. But of course, you've heard me mention that I do feel legitimately the Royals and the Cleveland Guardians deserve to be among the elite. There's something about New York and Baltimore's matchup that does feel like the future American League Conference Series, which is great because there's no Houston in sight. Let's go. Anyway, I would be excited to know that Baltimore takes such a substantial step forward this year, that their young guns can still help them be winners right now. Um, they're still looking up to New York, though. New York has done enough to set themselves up, and I won't say too much because obviously we only have 2 teams left. It's going to be fun baseball to watch them sharpen each other the rest of the way, and a tale of two types of philosophies. Isn't it amazing? The Yankees went out and bought the top of the division right now, and the Orioles, correct me if I'm wrong, they grew it. They just
Yeah.
friggin' grew it and raised it, bottle fed it. Like, who doesn't want to root for an Orioles team against a Yankees team? I mean, the baseball is going to be amazing, but you gotta root for these guys who grew this Baltimore team. It's so cool. Okay, Dan. We have crushed this countdown, and I love that we're already at our top 2 teams. We are killing it. I hope you guys have had a good time listening. We have a new contender to the top upper echelon of the league. I mean, they've been a riser before. I'm almost certain of that, but they also spent 3 weeks in the row or so before that in the basement, looking terrible, getting ready to get written off. And then the other team is New York. The Yankees, that is. Like, which one are you shooting for next, Dan? And which one do I get to talk about to close the show?
I think it's pretty easy to decide here, dude. Number 2, it's got to be the New York Yankees
Oh
because it
my
was
God.
you said it, man. It was so close to a perfect week for these Yankees. 7-2, 3 games at San Francisco, boom, sweep. 3 games against Minnesota, boom, sweep. 3 games against the
Mhm.
Dodgers, and they dropped the first 2, and they won one to prevent the sweep. But yeah, it's the only thing holding these Yankees back. I mean, it's also worth pointing out that Soto was absent for that entire series. So
Right.
literally the Yankees' best player, and they still won those first 2 games. And Aaron Judge totally took over for a lot of that. So the Yankees are just what we expect. So one spot above Baltimore just because of some strength of schedule in there. And really, those wins against the Dodgers is pretty huge. The Giants were kind of rebounding when they ran into them. And the Yankees are part of the reason Minnesota sank as low as they did this week. So, you know,
Really?
it's still impressive, even with Soto not on the team, to see how good the Yankees can be. We know the amount of injuries they have to Birdie, to Cole, to the guys that are going to come back and make this team even better. I mean, a plus 111 run differential at this point, Warren. The
Mhm.
Yankees have been up here consistently for the last several weeks, and I'm sure they'll drop
Mhm.
off at some point. But when you build such a steady lead, I mean, they're 46-21. They can lose
Mhm.
10 games in a row, and the only team they need to be worried about is Baltimore, right behind them.
True, though I did watch a lot of that series between New York and the Dodgers, and I did hear a fun conversation at one point from me that I will point out here, where the commentator said, "You got to look at these Yankees and think that there's really just Baltimore, right?" And then the other guy said, "Well, Seattle. Seattle did pitch them
Oh,
into a split, and
true.
that warmed my heart because that was the closest thing to respect I had heard about Seattle, not provided by a Seattle broadcaster. But don't let me make it about Seattle. I'm just teasing. I have been wanting to say all week, Dan, and been excited to say that we have not said enough about the amazing pitching in New York. The Yankees, believe it or not, guys, they're the best team in the league in terms of ERA now. Okay. It's not Philadelphia. It's not Boston. It's not Seattle. It is New York Yankees. And that is not what I had on my radar, right? When we were talking about this season, especially without Garrett Cole. as I know we've harped on and on about. They've allowed the fewest hits in the league. They struck out the sixth most batters. They have the second lowest whip. Like they're just incredible. And I think we haven't done enough to talk about it. Oh, second in earned runs. Second in or first in saves, guys. Like it goes on and on. Just silly. And then you look at the offense and it speaks for itself, and I shouldn't have to do it. I did hear a little bit about how Alex Verdugo has actually been the best defensive outfielder in the league this year. And I was picking up on him being good, but I didn't realize it was that good. He has been super important for this New York team, bringing some serious positive vibes and helping this to gel. They really gel well. If everybody stays healthy, as we always say, and Aaron Judge doesn't disappear, again, which even if he does, you can trust he'll be back. This team is paid to be ready to win a championship. We talked about how they were back. They bought it. They deserve it. They're going to play for it. Watch it and be ready because, the Yankees are the nemesis again for so many people. They get Kansas City next, 4 games in Kansas City. Watch that series, please, baseball fans. Just watch it. Let yourself experience it. Kansas City Kauffman Field. Baseball is fun. And the Yankees are going to have a hard time, quelling the Kauffman magic. Then 3 at Boston comes after that. That should be fun for New York to do what they do against their arch nemesis. And then 3 versus Baltimore. Yeah, this is the week to watch the Yankees. For the next 10 games, just watch the Yankees. You might as well, even you Los Angeles fans, you Dodger fans, might as well watch the team you're probably going to face in the World Series unless XYZ happens like baseball does. But Yankees are scary. They are good.
Or well done. I also just say that DJ LeMahieu's only been back with the team for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the only people who have an on base higher than him are Soto and Judge on the entire team.
Holy God. Talk about starting LeMahieu, hot, right? Man, we talked a couple weeks ago over and over again about guys coming into the season getting slow starts. Tommy Pham being an exception. Obviously, DJ LeMahieu as well. One of your favorite players, if I remember correctly. You've talked about him being pound for pound one of your favorites. Too bad he's a Yankee, right? Don't you wish?
Now, if he was a Met, I'd probably be miserable.
Well, because of the wasted effort and you're about to sell him? Maybe? I don't know. That seems like it's fair to me. You're nodding, so I'll accept it. All right, guys. The time is nigh. It is time to talk about the number 1 team in the league. We've mentioned them in and out of this countdown. If you followed along, you know who it is. It's the last team to talk about from the National League Central, the fastest rising team in that division and in the league, you could say. With an 8-2 record, having gone now 32-34, back in the mix for contendership in the National League, where there aren't too many teams over 500, are the number 1 team for the week. Cincinnati Reds! Round of applause. Where did you come from? Yeah, really. And just like how, we were talking about how Baltimore feasted on the bones of Tampa Bay a lot to be as good as they were this week. The Chicago Cubs were the team that fed the flames of these Reds quite a lot. First, they go 2-1 against the Cubs in Chicago. And then they go to Colorado and shockingly sweep Colorado at their home, which really started to tell us with scores like 13-3 and 12-7 that Cincinnati's figured enough out that this isn't just smoke on the water. And then they return to face Chicago, this time at home, I should say. And they take the first 3 before dropping only the 4th in a competitive game, 2-4. So Jonathan India, I think I mentioned last week, needed a grand slam to really help Cincinnati look better. I think they were like a top 8 team last week for us. Well, India got another grand slam this week and is starting to really stand out to me as the other guy, along with Spencer Steer and Ellie De La Cruz, that you can't you can't miss in Cincinnati right now, offensively anyway. What are your thoughts on the Reds, Dan? Can you believe they're number 1? And How do they do it?
Yeah, I kind of can't believe it because 3 of them against Colorado, but they're in Colorado, so hey, that's impressive. That means outslugging the Rockies, and I wouldn't have expected that from Cincinnati, to be honest. We saw
Phillies
Ellie kind of
Phillies couldn't do it. Guardians couldn't do it. So what the hell?
exactly. We saw Ellie kind of break out of a mini slump that he's been in, steal a couple more bags too. He's up to 34 on the season, which is great. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, divisional wins against Chicago. I mean, I think that's what I called Cincinnati out for was like, you need to win these divisional matchups. They took
Good
both of
call.
them, you can't call for much more than that. And the momentum that comes off of that, I mean, within this week, they had a 7-game win streak going, so you could
Mhm.
see, and we remember the Reds last year, right? Wherein the momentum could be huge for this team, and they're already right there at 500. So this could be the start of something for them. We're approaching that halfway point of the season, and we've talked about how they're going to have some guys coming back from injury, coming back from suspension. So this team might get a lot stronger just before we even get to the deadline, and then watch out.
Amen. Yeah. I mean, what can you do? Maybe get some veteran pieces is what I would do if I were them. Grab some guys with some experience under their belt, try to give up as little as possible from the
Yeah.
farm if you can. Maybe shore up pitching a tad, but we walked into the season discussing that they were a bit of a Swiss Army knife, capable of doing quite a few different things to counterpunch their opponents. If they're making their decisions increasingly intentionally, then they are going to blossom as a scary team in the National League because they're clever enough and can play their pieces in a way to counter a lot of different squads. And it's the time for us to see if it's sustainable. That's the key word. Can you, I suppose, as a parting question on our number one team, is this a sustainable mold? Can you even project a tad as they get ready to take on Cleveland, just 2 games at home? Then they hit the road for 2 series. First 3 in Milwaukee should be a great, great test. Both of these first 2 series really should be. And then we'll see where Pittsburgh's at, but they will welcome the Reds after that. So could be a really, really interesting next 10 days. If they're green next week, what the heck, right? Is this sustainable, Dan? Did I give enough time by stalling?
Yeah, I think it's totally sustainable. I think that if they can manage a green week and get wins out of 2 of those 3 series, if not all of them, then continuingly on the rise. Like I think that the Reds, will be eyes on them for the rest of the year. And like I said, like Marte and McLean coming back is going to be a huge boost for this team. So like, got to be ready for them.
True. Look around, everybody. The Reds are not completely out of the running yet, and those legs are churning. Good for them. It's fun to see a new face atop our rankings, even if it is obviously just off of their quality of play over the last 10 days. Hey guys, they had the best record. It's bottom line, 8-2 on that one. So very cool to see. Good luck to the Red Legs to keep it going. There's plenty of reason to believe they'll be just fine. But anything happens in baseball because baseball's weird. This countdown was pretty weird.
Was
Our anti rankings took on some pretty bold decisions. We can't wait to hear from our community of listeners. Again, thank you for making it this far. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your engagement, sharing, and letting us know how wrong we are about some of these decisions. Let us know down in the comments if you felt like we were rude for putting the White Sox twice at the bottom of the countdown in a row. We should just stop kicking the team while they're down. Or if you want to see more blood and we're way too nice to these guys, let us know in the comments below. Let us know if you're really shocked that Atlanta continues to sit in the 20s now 3 weeks in a row. These Braves are really on the ropes as far as being a legitimate World Series contender in our minds. Are you guys paying attention? How do you feel? Let us know in the comments below. At number 15, the Chicago Cubs. I mean, they really had no right being the middle team this week. They really are trending in the downward direction. They just have enough pieces to be able to stand on their own 2 feet in theory. Does that theory come true this week, do you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. Those Dodgers are at number 10. Blasphemy. Preposterous. I just watched them play the best baseball of the year against those Yankees. But hey, we got them at 10. How wrong is Dan? Tell us in the comments below. Number 5, the Seattle Mariners cracked the top 5. Are you sick of me putting them this high? I know you guys. I know our offense is bad.
How raw is Ward?
I deserve that. I deserve that. How many strikeouts will we get, guys? Plus or minus 888. Let me know in the comments below. It's definitely higher. It's definitely higher. And finally, number 1, guys. Did you see the Red Legs coming? Did you see these Cincinnati Reds racing past so many opponents in the National League Central and now looking once again like a, well, uncrowned playoff team to be? I mean, in a National League struggling the way it is, it's certainly possible. Let us know how much you believe in those Reds in the comments below. But hey, Dan, anything for our fans before we wish them a safe trip around the bases and turn off the lights in our Covering the Bases stadium?
Just that we're going to see trades starting to kick up soon as we approach the All-Star break and the trade deadline. So expect to see some more trades out there, and maybe we'll start speculating again like we did at the very beginning of the year.
Yes, and coming up soon will be our mid-season predictions breakdown, where we kind of look at what we said at the beginning of the year and how everything's trending. I gotta say, Dan, we don't look completely stupid. We're a little dumb, but
yeah, some stuff, no.
we'll have fun talking about that in a couple weeks. Hey, this was a really long wind up to the show. You've been listening to this backing track for a while, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys next time we take another trip around the bases.